Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, and you're watching TechStrong TV. Today's Monday, December the 7th, a day that'll live in infamy. Well, not really, but not anymore anyway, but welcome to TechStrong TV. We hope you're well. We hope you're safe and healthy. Things are bad out there around the world, especially here in the U.S. Let's hope that we get through these next couple of months healthy and well. Help is on the way. So let's jump into it. First of all, I was out last week. You can tell from my finger here. I was involved in a battle with a kitchen mandolin slicing machine, the Mandolin 1. My pinky lost, but I'm back. I haven't lost too much blood, and happy to be alive and well. In terms of today's shows, I've got some interesting content for you. First of all, I'm joined by my friend Sheng Liang. Sheng, of course, was the founder, was CEO over at Rancher Labs, makers of Rancher OS and other services. And we now, they were acquired by SUSE. That's now closed. Sheng's going to talk to us about the closing of the transaction, what his role is at SUSE going forward, and what we can expect to see, both from SUSE and the Rancher Labs product lines and the Kubernetes distro and service market in general. After that, I've got a great episode of Devops Unbound for you. It's actually a repeat of an old roundtable that we did. Not too old, but it's a roundtable that was open to a live audience. So we have live audience questions in there. And it features my friend Caroline Wang, who's the Chief Strategy Officer at Cobalt, Wolfgang Platz, co-founder or founder at Tricentis, I believe CTO, Jane Grohl, my partner and CEO at the Devops Institute, Anders Walgren of CloudBees, and of course Mitchell Ashley of Accelerated Strategies, and myself. It's a great roundtable, great discussion. It's around tracking the top challenges together. So great Devops Unbound episode there for you. After that, for something old, we're going to go back to Devops Experience from this past October. And I'm happy to feature a woman that I just find so refreshing and such an inspirational story. Her name is Raven Manuel. Raven, like me, is from New York City. She now works for the Smithsonian Institution at the Museum of African American Culture and History, I believe it's called. But she runs, one of the leaders of their DevOps program. And she presented a Devops Experience on DevOps lessons learned and learning. And I believe she's presenting at Predict as well, January 21st, 22nd. So we're really, really happy to have Raven. I think she's also going to be on one of our upcoming Devops Unbound episodes. Raven is just, watch this lady. She's really bright, really just a breath of fresh air. I think you'll find really interesting. After that, I'm going to turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our Chief Content Officer. And Charlene will be giving us news, headlines around the media ops world, as well as a great interview with Steve George and Mark Ram of Weaveworks, the people behind Gitops. And then Charlene will also give us a bit of a webinar preview. And she has two other interviews, actually. She has another interview, actually, with Jan Miller-Osborne, from Palo Alto Networks, and they're going to talk about their Unit 42 research, which has uncovered some bad apps on the Google Play Store that effectively are spyware. And, I hate hearing stories like that, but it's happening every day, and it's affecting us, obviously. And then Charlene, as I said, will give us a webinar preview as well. After that, I'll be back to introduce you over to Mitch at the Analyst Corner. And Mitch today has Gareth Smith, CTO with Eggplant Software. Eggplant's been doing a lot of interesting stuff. We've interviewed them as well before here. And he has Ron Benabtum, I'm probably mispronouncing that, Benetton, GM of Imperva, Web Application Security. Good stuff there as well. And then I'll be back to wrap things up. So just your usual 2.5, 3 hours or so of TechStrong TV today. Let's take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back with our first guest. You know, I've known Sheng for many years, Sheng Liang, before he even started Rancher, Cloud.com, and other places. I did a great job, though, with the Rancher Labs company. It's now officially part of SUSE, or SUSE. That transaction has closed. Sheng has a very important role at SUSE. He's going to tell us all about it, as well as what to expect if you're a Rancher Labs customer using Rancher OS or one of their other open source projects, some of which are part of CNCF, as well as where he sees the market going. You know, Sheng's so darn smart. I enjoy every time I speak with him. Here's my interview with Sheng Liang of SUSE.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. Thanks for joining us here on another segment of TechStrong TV. I'm really happy to be joined by my friend Sheng Liang. Sheng was he still is, the founder. He was CEO at Rancher Labs and the folks behind Rancher OS and so many other open source projects and Kubernetes distros and so much more. Sheng is now, of course, part of a new company who purchased, right, SUSE, had acquired Rancher, and he has some news around that for us today. Sheng, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alan. It's great to talk to you. I think about a few months ago, we told you SUSE has signed an agreement to acquire Rancher, and that had to go through a pretty lengthy, regulatory approval process. So we successfully concluded that, and the deal, the acquisition was closed as of last week. So now I'm an official SUSE employee. I'm the president of engineering and innovation. I'm leading their very strong, much larger engineering team, and couldn't be more excited.
You know what? Congratulations to you, Sheng, and to all of the Rancher people, though. You know, we're, especially the last week or two, we've seen so much M&A activity coming down. And people say, oh, this one's for that amount of money, and that one got acquired, and this one bought that one, and these two merged. And you don't realize, and I've been there, so I know, to build a company from scratch and build it to the point where someone's able to, or someone is willing to write a big check, whether it be in cash or stock or both or whatever, but to really value your creation is such a rewarding, beyond the money, beyond the financial aspect of it. It's such a rewarding experience to know that, you know what, you built something that people really value. And it's the ultimate proof in the pudding. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. I mean, we tend to just kind of focus on, exactly like you said, build up of something of value, a value to the users and the value to our customers. And that usually pays off in the end.
So let's talk about customers first. What does the SUSE acquisition closing mean for Rancher OS customers? What will change? What won't change? What can they expect? And also, look, there's a lot of SUSE customers in the world too, right? Beyond just Rancher customers. And what does it mean for them?
I think, and I haven't talked to a lot of, SUSE and Rancher share some joint customers. I've certainly talked to them. I've talked to a lot of Rancher customers. I haven't talked to a lot of SUSE customers who are not Rancher customers yet. But overall, I would say the feedback I've gotten is extremely positive. I think we could not have found a better home for Rancher to land. First and foremost is just SUSE's commitment, not just to open source, but to like true open source, the kind of open source that doesn't lock people in. Like as you know, Rancher is Kubernetes distro agnostic. Rancher is also Linux distro agnostic. I mean, we work with SUSE Linux, of course, but we also work with many other Linux distros, including even Windows, and all that support will continue. There's absolutely no concern from our customers about Rancher going to SUSE for that reason.
Excellent. So, is there any? I mean, I'm just trying to think of like a ramp, an on-ramp, or a roadway, or roadmap of what Rancher customers might want to focus in on or be on the lookout for.
Yeah. So what the existing Rancher customers can look forward to is even faster rate of innovation, because Rancher has always been small and nimble and react to customer needs and build a great, easy to use product, and just having a lot of raw engineering horsepower has never been our thing, because you're a startup. We compete with much larger competitors. Now we're part of SUSE. We essentially have the resource of an established trusted IT player at our back, right? And it's just, this is what customers are really look forward to. And the other area is not just engineering, but our ability to support customers, our ability to stand behind customers. I've been on actually quite a few calls over the years where I get on a call with the CIO or VP of infrastructure or VP of digital transformation. They'd say, we love your product, but all my architects vouch for you, all my managers vouch for you. But how am I going to be confident that I'm picking the right partner here? How much money you have in the bank? Are you going to be around, right? 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So I think with the combination of Rancher and SUSE, they don't have to worry about that anymore.
Agreed. And again, if you haven't been there, you haven't lived it. When you're a relatively small startup versus a public entity or a well-established brand like a SUSE, that is the kind of questions you get from large enterprises.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not looking for a one-year honeymoon here.
Yeah.
Long term, I've got to be sure you're going to be around, and if you're not, what happens to your software and your product? Speaking on that subject, though, Sheng, Rancher has also fostered several open source projects.
Yeah.
And we're over to the CNCF now, right?
Yeah.
You're very involved with CNCF. What's the future? Any change with? I mean, SUSE is an open source company as well.
Exactly. I think you can expect our rate of open source innovation to continue. Open source is, a lot of people think it's a great way to market technology, which is true. It's a great way to support customers or build a community. All these things are true. But for me, honestly, first and foremost, it's just a great way to build software. Just with open source, you can effectively bypass a lot of the initial inefficiencies around fumbling around with product market fit, building the wrong thing. Like you're basically directly in conversation with your potential user base as you build it, right? And you don't really get that you don't really get that. Things don't get lost in translation. People are very, very vocal. So Rancher's benefited on that greatly. The successful open source companies of today tend to be able to create innovative projects, then convert these projects into either product features or standalone products, and then you should definitely expect that momentum to occur. Like just in the last few years, I mean, look at what Rancher's launched. You mentioned K3S. We have a storage project, Longhorn. Both of these are part of CNCF Sandbox now, and then we have a lot of other projects that we already launched, like the fleet management. Managing 1 million edge clusters, which is incredible. Rancher itself is a very successful open source project. It's essentially a product by itself, but it's a big platform, but it's also open source, very, very popular. And we have so many more open source projects in the pipeline, and just please keep your eye out. I mean, we have a very, very rich innovation pipeline, and now with the combination of SUSE, we tap into a much larger pool of resources with basically the same kind of mindset, and you should definitely expect the rate to increase.
Yep. Sheng, I want to bring up another topic if it's okay with you.
Yeah.
You were the first person who said it to me this way, and I remember it struck months and months ago, maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
And we were talking about Kubernetes distributions, Kubernetes as a service, just the unbelievable adoption rate of Kubernetes. And you said something, and I'm probably going to mess it up, but something along the lines of Kubernetes today is, for all intents and purposes, compute. When we talk about compute, it is Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And it stuck with me, and I used that, and I referenced it several times. Sometimes I don't give you credit for it.
You're exactly right.
But it is. You're right? It is. It for all intents and purposes, it's synonymous with compute today, with computing.
Yeah.
Look, let's not beat around the bush. I'm sure SUSE, part of their attraction to Rancher OS was that the Kubernetes distribution.
Yeah.
That comes with it has a good part of the value of the company. Where do you see that market?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great. I think the market it's really interesting. I mean, you're spot on in saying Kubernetes is essentially compute, but that has consequences. Like when Kubernetes is, if you think about what used to be compute, people consider compute could be like a Intel server. That was compute, standard compute, right? When you remember when we used to say compute, we always have a logo of an Intel server, So. Yep. But now it's the Kubernetes layer. The cool thing about Kubernetes layers is agnostic. It works across clouds, public clouds, private clouds, and on the edge. I mean, when you get something like that. So what this is kind of enabling is I use another analogy, recently. I just said, this is all compute to the same degree that TCP/IP is networking. It's not necessarily about the implementation anymore. The fact that all these compute elements, now they all talk the same Kubernetes language, right? Just like how the networking elements now all of a sudden, 20, 30 years ago started talk TCP/IP. Then the internet was born. Then the web services were born. Then Amazon was born. Cisco was born. So that's what we really see. Imagine going forward. The organizations really can tap into this vast pool of compute resources that are consistent, that's available on demand, that is very, very friendly to the modern applications that they're building. And we want to build, we want to just make that harnessing all of that computing resources easy. And that's what the Rancher platform is about. So Rancher is actually everything else you said, like, the K3S, all this other stuff is actually Kubernetes distro. Rancher is actually where we make the most money. Is not a Kubernetes distro. It's a Kubernetes, we call it a Kubernetes management system. It's something that it's like, if you think Kubernetes as like TCP/IP, then Rancher is more like a router. It's something that ties together these different network ports, right? It's not necessarily just the implementation of networking. So I think that's what we've been truly successful. And because ultimately enterprise once everything is consistent, just the desire and the benefit of managing it centrally is enormous. And that's what Rancher is.
Absolutely. Sheng, I want to apologize. I'm trying to take advantage of the beautiful weather here at home, doing this recording outside, and I can't control the whole neighborhood. And someone was making, a gardener or something, a landscaper was making noise there. So hopefully...
No, I don't hear it at all. You have a very good directional microphone. So I don't hear it at all.
Okay, let's hope so, but I apologize. All right. So Kubernetes, I mean, obviously is going to be king for the foreseeable future and all of that. And Rancher does, have, because there was a Rancher OS before.
That's right.
Kubernetes, right?
That's right.
And all of that. Shane, we're almost actually out of time, but I wanted to ask, what else do you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, the one of the things that SUSE is particularly strong is the ability to work with a lot of other partners in our industry. From both from folks that build networking, folks that build storage, folks that build systems, people that actually serve customers, value-added resellers, MSPs, integrators. So, and this honestly has always been a space that it's been a little challenging again for a startup to try to navigate that space, right? But as Rancher product mature, like recently, just a couple of weeks ago, we had this big announcement with NetApp. It's really exciting. So NetApp hyperconverged infrastructure basically decided to OEM Rancher as their.
Yes, we actually covered that.
Yeah, I know. It's really cool. So I'm, just opportunity for that kind of stuff to unlock is tremendous. I really look forward to, like SUSE, they talk about the diamond. I think Rancher covered 3 out of 4, like they are the employees, customers, and community. But the 4th one is, the partners. I think that's an area as a startup Rancher was a bit weak. And I can't wait to jump on with SUSE and start to grow and foster that kind of win-win relationship with partners.
Excellent. Shang, let me close again by congratulating you. A great job bringing Rancher into dock on the SUSE platform. And you have a great position here. I can't wait to see what you're going to do with a bigger team, more resources. You'll come back and visit us, but now we'll say Shang Liang from SUSE.
Absolutely, and I bet it should be, more innovative projects, open source projects. Okay, love to talk to you about those as they appear.
Liang, founder, Rancher Labs, makers of Rancher OS, K3S, many different projects and services here on TechStrong TV. Good luck, Shang. We'll see you soon. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with another guest.
Thank you.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Next up, we have a Devops Unbound Roundtable. We do a Devops Unbound episode every other week here on TechStrong TV. It's also available at devopsunbound.com as well as on Digital Anarchist. Once a month, though, we do our roundtable. It's open to the public. You register, you log on, you can interact with our panel on whatever the subject happens to be this month. For those of you who maybe missed the roundtables because they're not as widely distributed, we've decided to include them a little bit after the fact on TechStrong TV. So in this Devops Roundtable, we had Wolfgang Platz, the founder, CTO over at Tricentis, along with Caroline Wong, Chief Strategy Officer at Cobalt.io, Jane Grohl, my partner and CEO of Devops Institute, as well as Anders Walgren, VP over at CloudBees. We had a great discussion on tackling the top challenges together in DevOps, Dev Everything Ops. Great discussion. Had some great audience participation. If you like this, you should check out DevOps Unbound and stay tuned for the next live roundtable. We'd love to have you join in. But here now is a DevOps roundtable on Dev Everything Ops. Welcome to another roundtable webinar. We have a great one for you today. It's a panel roundtable as part of our DevOps Unbound series, which is sponsored by Tricentis. And today's topic is Dev Everything Ops. I'm going to jump into that in just a minute, but I wanted to take a moment for some housekeeping. For most of you joining using the GoToWebinar webinar system, you're going to see your GoToWebinar control panel in your upper right-hand corner. I just want to call out two things in the control panel for you today. Number one, this is a roundtable webinar. It's not going to be slideware and watching slides. It's going to be an active discussion, and you, our audience, are part of that active discussion. So I want to call your attention to the section of the control panel marked questions. And I'm going to ask you to click on that little arrow or caret to make it downward facing and expand the question section. You'll see that you can type your questions in there. We're not saving questions for the end. We're going to ask questions in real time. We'll work them in. So as your question pops into your mind, please type it in there. We'll get it to our panel, to our audience. We'll see what the consensus is and we'll discuss it. So questions for our panel about Dev Everything Ops, please put them into the question section on the control panel, and we'll do our best to answer them. I next want to call your attention down to the bottom of the control panel where you'll see another section marked chat. Here at Media Ops, we use our chat sessions if you're having any technical issues. So if the audio is dragging or a video dropped or something happened, but you can still get to that chat session, we do have people standing by to help you. We want you to get as much as you can out of these webinars. So please, if you have a technical issue, type it in the chat section. Someone will help you. If you have a question for our panel, type it in the question section. We'll get it done. So that's it on housekeeping. Let me now introduce you to our panel here today. And I'm pumped that we were able to get these people. It's an amazing panel. Some really, this is going to be a great discussion. Let me introduce you first. I'm looking at it on my control panel. I'm going to go left to right. First, I want to introduce you to Mitch Ashley. Mitchell is CEO of Accelerated Strategies Group. Mitchell, introduce yourself, a little background.
Yes, yeah, I come to this both as a CIO as well as a product CEO, CTO. So kind of been on both sides of the adoption curve. So I'm excited to talk with Caroline and Jane and Wolfgang and you and Anders. It's a great panel.
Thanks, Mitch. Next is the CEO of the Devops Institute, my friend Jane Grohl. Jane, welcome. A little background.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Grohl. As Alan said, I'm CEO of the Devops Institute. We're a global member association where, at least as of today, membership is free. So I hope everybody will join. You know, I come from the ops side. I was an IT director for a long time and had the privilege of getting to know DevOps starting in around 2012. So it's really been fascinating watching the rise. And then, of course, Alan and I are co-founders of Devops Institute. So again, like Mitch, really excited about today's panel.
Next, we have Anders Walgren of CloudBees. And Anders, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Anders Walgren from CloudBees. Been with CloudBees for about coming up on 18 months now as the VP of Technology Strategy. Before that, I was Chief Technical Officer at Electric Cloud for about 15 years. Before then, we were acquired by CloudBees. And these are my people. These are my favorite people to hang out and talk and be nerdy with. So looking forward to the hour today.
Fantastic. Next, we have our Chief Strategy Officer contingent. We have not one, but two Chief Strategy Officers today. First is our founder of Tricentis and Chief Strategy Officer, Wolfgang Kondik. Wolfgang, a little background.
Yeah, hi. My name is Wolfgang Platz. I'm as you already mentioned.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. That's okay. Founder, Chief Strategy Officer of Tricentis. Tricentis being the #1 company in the software testing space. So I will certainly bring a bit of my perspective, my experience in the software testing space into this panel as a substitute of everything here. And super excited to be with you guys, and let's make it a great hour for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Wolfgang. And last but not least, also Chief Strategy Officer, my friend Charlene O'hanlon. Charlene, a little background on Cobalt, perhaps, and you?
Yes, hello, Charlene Wong, Chief Strategy Officer at Cobalt.io, where we build security software. So a lot of DevOps companies, we've got data-driven, product-based teams. We value automation and failing fast. One could say that I've spent the past 15 years as a DevSecOps professional, although we used to simply call it InfoSec. I started off my security career at eBay and Zynga. In both cases, companies that were running online operations 24/7 with millions of simultaneous users daily. So always thrilled to have an opportunity to participate in these types of discussions.
Thank you. Okay, we're already starting to get questions from our audience, and we're going to get to them. But I want to throw it out there for you all right off the bat and say, you know, we call this Dev Everything Ops. What is this Dev Everything Ops? What do we mean by that? What does it mean to you, right? When we say Dev Everything Ops or Dev X Ops, I've seen it as well. You know, Jane, I'm going to ask you to kind of kick off. What's with Dev Everything Ops?
So I look at DevOps perhaps a little differently than other people. So I'll just tell you my definition and why I think it is Dev Everything Ops. And I'm going to use an analogy, and the analogy is going to be pizza. So it's 9 o'clock in the morning. We're not eating pizza today, but for argument's sake, let's say that we are. I look at DevOps as a recipe. So if you think about your recipe for pizza, I'm going to make everybody hungry. My recipe and your recipe are really different, but at its heart, DevOps is a set of principles. And so I think we've kind of diluted the definition so that's why we have DevSecOps, Biz, all of that, but that's part of the recipe, right? A recipe in and of itself has no value. It's writing on a piece of paper, on a tablet, or something else, but it is a proportion of the ingredients that go into that recipe, the quality of the ingredients that go into that recipe, and the proportion of those ingredients that go into that recipe, and of course the skill of the person making the recipe. So if you think of DevOps in that perspective, again, in and of itself, it's a set of principles. We need, you know, very, very pervasive testing. We need security. We need the business. We need, you know, CI/CD pipelines. We need, you know, containers. We need all that. And so for each organization, your pizza, my pizza may be different, but it is the quality of that pizza is really going. Pizza in and of itself has no value, right? It's Alan, we're from New York, right? Pizza in and of itself has no value. But if you look at the recipe for your DevOps, I think that everything that goes into it is going to be, first of all, there's going to be some standards, right? But it's also going to be very dependent on the quality, proportion, and the skill of the person making the recipe. So hopefully you're all now hungry for pizza.
Never think of pizza again the same way.
Everything pizza, right? There you go.
Yeah. How about anyone else on the panel? Any thoughts, comment, follow up on that?
I like that point of view on it, and not just because it's 6 o'clock here and I'm still thinking of pizza. I mean, to me, it's kind of the big tent metaphor, right? It's you know, kind of being inclusive of all the functions and all the stakeholders that are involved, you know, starting from ideation all the way to when, you know, the value is in the customer's hands and working properly, safely, securely, all of those things. And you know, so I think it's, you know, we started with DevOps, you know, in this moniker, and then we've been sort of gradually inserting everything in between, and I'm fine with that. I mean, I think it's one of those things where if that brings attention to a particular area, if it's for a while or if it's for a long time, I think that's great. You know, DevSecOps is probably the one that we hear a lot these days, and I think that's, you know, completely legitimate. And I think it's good because I think that fosters discussion about what are the roles of the various stakeholders and how can we make these things easier and better and make the, you know, the right way the default way and all those things. I'm kind of in favor of all these changing of that word, changing of that phrase. and evolving it and talking about those things, because I think that's what DevOps is talking about all the things that are involved and doing all the things that are involved to get the software out the door.
You know, to build on that, Anders, you know, I've asked my spouse if she could get me some cold pizza, so we'll have that in a minute. But anyway, a non-food analogy, I think it's very much like Agile. You hear about Agile business and all kinds of uses of the word Agile. And to me, what it means is there's some principles behind Agile that apply. And people can see that in their own domain, their own work domain. Same for DevOps. The whole bringing ops into the aspect of the business that you're in and integrating groups together. I think that's why it's applicable. So that to me is a sign, not only have we had effect on the development organization, it's affecting the whole company.
Anybody else before I'm, go ahead, Wolfgang.
So, yeah, sure. I think when I want to come up with a different analogy here, which is about building a house. All right. When DevOps is okay, development, you build a house for a certain purpose, you want to then operate it. But when you do this, you want to also make sure that it's really going to work. And this brings me back to the stakeholders. You want to make sure that all the different stakeholders are involved. First of all, in order to really make it work, you want to test the functionality because houses tend to be different. The one house is different from another house, and you want to have this check of functionality. On the other hand, you also want to make sure that people can really be safe in there. So, meaning if you are not here for a week or so, you want to make sure that there is no one breaking into your house, right? And you're going to find your house safe when you come back. And in addition to that, it's all about customers, of course, right? You cannot build a house neglecting the needs of the ones who should live in there. We want to have all these guys on board. And the developers per se, they have a very progressive mindset, a very mindset pointing towards the need of the in the end game, the functionality in order to be provided to have somebody live a good life in there. But that might not be comprehensive enough. It's very focused on the end product, but there are aspects you tend to not have a very clear picture on. And these additional elements need to be brought into the space. Security is growing 35% per year, as you know. It needs to be brought into the space for good reason, because there are offenses. Software testing is a super relevant aspect because, yes, we know that the complexity of these buildings is increasing, and when you change something in the basement, you want to make sure that your top floor is not crumbling, right? So all these things together make up the building that you want to deliver to your business.
So
Caroline?
I think that words really matter, and I really like Dev Everything Ops. I think there's an acknowledgement, as folks have said, particularly Wolfgang, that it's not just customers that matter, it's not just engineers that matter, it's not just engineering and ops. I'd actually love to take Jane's analogy and kind of zoom way out for a moment and think about the butchers and the dairy farmers and the chefs and the distribution of the folks who, you know, harvest and provide the tomatoes to the grocery outlets. You know, I think we've seen this shift in software development from waterfall, where you have gates, Agile, where you do it all faster, and then DevOps, where you do it faster together and all the time. And you've got this network of interconnected folks collaborating and working toward a common goal in a continuous, iterative manner. So really love Jane's analogy of the pizza. And I think you can actually zoom out and imagine all of these different processes happening in an ongoing, continuous, and sort of iterative way.
It's all about the supply chain. I think that's a great analogy.
I mean, you can take Wolfgang's house, and it's the people chopping down the trees in the forest and preparing the lumber and making the nails and all the other, you know, elements of what's building in a house. Let me just play devil's advocate though, because that's how I am. So, I remember when I started DevOps.com about 7 years ago, and coming like Caroline from the security side of things, the term DevSecOps was treated as blasphemy by many in the DevOps community. I had, when I first did the first RSA DevSecOps event, I had Gene Kim and Josh Corman and some other folks there. There was a tremendous pushback from the DevOps community, because they said it's DevOps. There is no small DevOps, enterprise DevOps. There is no startup DevOps. There is no test DevOps. There is no security. It's DevOps, and there's just one DevOps, and anything else is superfluous. It's not part of it. And there was another contingent, call them the ultra orthodox DevOps crowd, who really said if we wanted to call it DevSecOps, we would have called it DevSecOps. If we wanted to put test in there, we would have said DevTestOps. But we didn't. We called it DevOps because it's about dev and ops, and that's what it's about. It's not about all these other things. Now, fast forward 7 years, and here we are having this discussion. If I asked some of those people back then to come forward now, I don't know if they would have changed their minds or not. I think certainly the market has become more encompassing and forgiving. But at its heart, is it still just DevOps, right? Is everything we're talking about just DevOps? Are we taking core DevOps and just kind of watering it down or applying it out to all of these other disciplines? And I think that I think that's what it is. I'm going to bring in a quick question. So dev, whatever ops is the next step in evolution of the convergence of all these development strategies. Agree or disagree? Anders, Wolfgang, what do you think?
I mean, a lot of these are philosophical topics, right? I mean, and even bordering on religion sometimes, right? When you get down to how we define these things, ultra orthodox as you sort of brought in there. But I think it ultimately it's about it. I had a very eye-opening moment probably about 3 or 4 years ago at one of the DevOps Enterprise shows, where a gentleman got up in a lunch panel that I was on and said, "Look, we keep talking about dev and we keep talking about ops, but let's not forget when we're doing these things, you've got HR, you've got finance, you've got you've got everybody in the whole organization that has to kind of help operate and do these. This was a discussion under the kind of the digital transformation umbrella, but it was very much one of those things where that opened my eyes to, yeah, you're right. If you're really going to make DevOps work, you can't just focus on dev and ops. You're not going to be able to change how you're doing things if I'll just put it sort of somewhat strongly, if you ignore the rest of the world other than dev and ops, you're not going to succeed. And to me, that was when I shifted and said, okay, I don't care what you put in the middle between dev and ops. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that we get the job done and do it right. And if we have to change definitions to do that, I'm fine with that. So.
Excellent.
I think
I'm good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think all big changes, all new things happen at a certain spot, and there are areas that are more often subject to these changes and triggering these changes than others. Development is an area where a lot of change has been initiated. I would say that that all the frustration with development and the waterfall times have at the very end triggered this great agile movement. And then people found out, wait a minute, dev is not enough, right? It's just too short-sighted. And yeah, so we must not stop with dev. We want to go further. We want to have also a clear perspective on the ones who should consume the software. And so we want to have operations included into this. And then it's DevOps, right? And now we say, but now this is enough, right? Don't do anything else. No, DevOps, it's just DevOps. Come on, guys. It's not just DevOps. It's more than that. It's more than that. Call it whatever. I don't care. As long as you don't forget about as long as you don't forget about having a decent software testing in there, as long as you don't forget about security, as long as you talk to the business people, I'm fine, right? I don't want to go into religious debates here. As a matter of fact, you want to have all the stakeholders on board. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And to the religious fundamentalists, I got to tell these guys, don't close your eyes. See what's going on in the market. We have seen Agile 1, people struggling with that. Their Scrum 1 is crumbling, right? Now they're going for Scrum 2. And don't educate me that it doesn't make a difference whether you implement this in a small one team thingy or you implement it in an enterprise. It's simply not true. It's a complete different ballgame whether it's just 3 people cooperating or 300 or 3,000, right? It is different. It makes things more complex. People act differently on a one-to-one basis than they operate in a big body. It is a fact. So let's face that. Let's make sure that the merits of this approach of agility and DevOps are suitable even to big organizations, and let's stop educating on purified ideas and ideologies and stuff, right? So sorry for being so blunt here.
No, it's great. As the CEO of Devops Institute. I'm sorry, we're getting a little feedback in here. Maybe someone can mute. As the CEO of Devops Institute, you kind of have a gravitas here in what is, on this question of what is DevOps and what is not DevOps, right? So I'm going to ask you to put your official DOI hat on now and weigh in.
So, I mean, isn't everything we're talking about really the human aspects of DevOps, right? So, there's kind of these multiple factions where there's the belief that you could get to DevOps purely through automation or purely through humans. And the reality is it's the combination of the two. But everything we're talking about, is it a cry from the humans to make sure they're counted, to make sure that what they're doing is important, that as DevOps has risen to be something that's become a global phenomenon, let's not forget about security. Let's not forget about testing. Let's not forget about the business. Let's not forget about the humans. And so what we don't want is that we don't want it to be religious, but we also don't want it to be political, where the reason we're looking at Dev, Biz, Sec, Ops, on the DevSecOps side, there's a faction that wants to call it SecDevOps. I was on a conversation with a fairly large organization recently that absolutely wants to invest in SecDevOps because they feel security has to be the stronger. And maybe that's so. But there is a human kind of an emotional piece of this that I think we'd be really remiss if we weren't addressing the fact that, call it whatever you want. It's IT. We don't call it biz dev, sec, ops, IT, right? It's IT. It's a new way of approaching IT. Going back to Wolfgang and Agile, think about the origins of the Agile Manifesto. The Agile Manifesto was born because there were a bunch of very, very frustrated developers that were feeling that the complexity of what they were being asked to do was really overwhelming what they were trying to achieve. And that was very human, right? It was very, very human, long time, but very human. So I think that when we start to look at this, step away from the religion, if this becomes religious, we're in trouble. I saw that with ITIL. Right, where ITIL actually did become open book one, look at chapter and verse, and the market in many ways lost a lot of the spirit of what's being offered. This becomes religious, that's really dangerous. If it becomes political, that's really dangerous. If it becomes really human, DevOps Institute, our mission is to advance the human elements of DevOps, and we take that very seriously. If this doesn't remain human, or we don't acknowledge that it is humans that are going to really drive the transformation, I think we won't be able to succeed, and it will become one of those really nice things, that happened earlier in this millennium that ended up reverting back to the same old. So,
Yeah. On the issue of complexity, we've got Mark from the audience wrote it's a long question, so I'm going to ask you to bear with me
as I read it. Modern enterprise systems are multi-architecture, multi-platform, multi-products that have hundreds of thousands of interrelated things that are constantly being updated. How do you start digitizing the DevOps ecosystem so that more knowledge can be systematically provided to product teams that only have a perspective of a very small part of the system, so they can understand the context of what they're working in? And this is part of the Dev Everything Ops. We could say we're doing Dev Everything Ops, and it's everything. But each of us work on a piece, right? Sometimes it's hard to see that whole picture. How does SEC fit in? How does, where do we put the test in? And we're always talking about things like shift left. But how, this is a hugely complex ecosystem, from the people growing trees to chopping them down and making lumber, to the carpenter who bangs the nails in, to someone who paints the house and sheetrocks, right? There's so many pieces. How do you coordinate this complex ecosystem if we're going to call that Dev Everything Ops, right?
So I've got a suggestion, Alan, and I think we can actually take something. So I've got a 5-year-old. She's about to start kindergarten remotely in a couple of weeks. And what's going to happen is there's going to be this combination of asynchronous and synchronous learning. And I actually think that we can take this into the workplace. I think we already have. I want to provide the example of a recent company kickoff. Normally, the whole team would get together, the whole Cobalt team in Berlin every summer. And instead what we did it virtually. And part of what we normally do is all of the department heads get up on stage and they say, here's my strategy, here are my commitments, because it's an accountability exercise and it's also a transparency exercise. Now, the way that we did that in a virtual setting, because we didn't want to have folks sitting in front of their computer screens for 8 hours a day, was we actually had folks record video ahead of time, and we assigned homework. And we said, everyone watch these short videos. And then what you do when you get together is we actually split out into breakout rooms, and you have booth style Q&A, so that you're able to both optimize the transparency and the information sharing, as well as start some discussion around it. So I actually think the biggest thing is a little bit of data organization, which could be boring and unsexy, but is actually super duper important to keep track of your inventories, as well as a culture of transparency and information sharing. This is something that I've seen wildly shift in the security community over the past decade or so. Security used to be this kind of like, oh, you buy your threat intelligence solution and only 3 people in the company ever have access to that data, which arguably you'd actually maybe make more use of your threat intelligence data if you shared it more broadly. And I see that happening today. So I do think that that's an important cultural shift to not only get your data organized, which is not sexy, but it's really important, but also to do information sharing and like ultra transparency.
Excellent. So awesome. Let's move the discussion. So whether we want to call it or not, Dev Everything Ops is a thing. It's real, right? Caroline, you hit on some ways of dealing with it. At all of your organizations, and Mitchell, you speak to many organizations, as does Jane, Anders and Wolfgang, you work at 2 of the leading DevOps related, whether it be test organizations in the world. How do you do Dev Everything Ops? How do we, what are the biggest challenges and how are you working with them?
So if I may start, first of all, let me before I come to this, let me comment on Caroline's statement a bit.
Sure.
I would have a question for you, Caroline. How many of those people really consume the videos up front, except for you?
Yeah, no, that's a super good question. And to be totally honest, I was really worried that nobody was going to watch the videos. So there's a couple of things at play here that I experienced when we did this. One thing is, you get an executive up on a stage, you can see it with us, frankly, everyone's going to talk for 30 minutes. You get them to record a video and they have to record it on their own machine and they have to produce it. it's only going to be 5 minutes long. So there is actually, I think, an efficiency that's gained that has to do with the nature of recording video of oneself. The other thing that I was really surprised at, I really thought that no one was going to watch the videos, and they totally watched the videos. And I think that actually has to do not with the setup that we did in July, but actually what we did way ahead of time. In January, we were able to get the whole company together, all as a person in San Francisco. And I expect that we were actually able to leverage those connections and that trust. And so I think it can't be sort of a one-time thing where you expect folks to do things. There's got to be a culture of accountability. So I do think that that's going to differ in various places, but I think there are ways of putting folks on the spot, making them accountable so that the cultural expectation becomes you're going to watch these five-minute videos.
So why did I ask? Because I think one of the greatest challenges that we're facing with Agile development and with Scrum is that the picture that they have regarding developers is idealistic. And I was coming to that. I was asking myself whether your expectation that people would even consume this upfront came true, because it might be too idealistic. It might be too much expecting people to contribute. So why do I point this out? Some of the assumptions of Agile development. Unfortunately, I'm having an echo here. Every once in a while. Whatever that is.
And it might be coming from you because I see lighting up green.
Yeah, now I had it from you also. Okay. It's still here. Let me try to keep going. So whenever people have this very idealistic picture of human beings and try to use that as a basis of processes and approaches, I think it's very dangerous, right? So one of the key ideas of Agile development was everybody is here to each and every day produce great software. And this is the one mission that everybody has. I mean, it's simply not true. Face it, if you have 100 developers, 20 of that will be like this, right? How about the other 80? The other 80, they may have a bad day and not be as idealistic on that particular day, and just be normal developers producing something, right? And let the day go by. That's fine. So, and I think you gotta be very aware of who you're working with in order to get the real results. Otherwise, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be able to have this one super team perform in Agile development and smashing it out and be better than 100 others could ever be. That's going to happen, but that's going to be an exception. Face it. So when you ask me, how do we do testing? We do testing in a very pragmatic flavor. We set up testing in a way where we try to acknowledge that, yes, doing manual testing repeatedly is super boring, okay? Face it. Try to automate these things. If you go for manual testing, then do it in a way that it's more thrilling. Then it needs to be exploration, okay? Otherwise, it's not gonna work. Make sure you accept how human beings are in order to make it work. We try to provide a very comprehensive flavor of the different approaches that we use for software testing in order to make do with all the people that are around, and not just these 2-3% experts here that might be that might really be ideal. Okay.
Fair enough. Anders, what about you? I mean, in your role, you've been involved over the years in so many different aspects of this. I mean, what do you think? I do think the issue can become one of complexity, frankly. But Anders,
I'm glad you used that word, because I think that's what it is. And the only way I know how to manage complexity is abstraction. If I had to worry about whether the transistors in my computer are edge triggered or level triggered or any of those sorts of things, I would never get any work done. And so I think a lot of this, and kind of going back to Mark's question on multi-platform, multi-architecture, multi-product, multi-team, multi. Levels of abstraction are really the only way to do this. And I think that's incredibly important, and kind of going both to what Caroline and what Wolfgang talked about in terms of, you think you have, sometimes we think we have a sort of a uniform body of people, developers, and they think this way and they do this and they do that. Well, these are individuals. Some of them, come to work, write their code, go home because they care about their family more than they care about their job. Other people are incredibly passionate and think, about their job 24/7, which isn't necessarily healthy either. So you're always going to have different, amounts of take up on any strategy, any communication, any sort of things that you're trying to get done. And if you are constantly having to explain all the way down to the transistor level how everything is supposed to fit together and work, you're going to drown, right? You're going to drown as soon as you're not writing calculator or notepad. You're going to drown. And so levels of abstraction are incredibly powerful for this. And that's one of the reasons why loosely coupled architectures and microservices are so useful, because they put these levels of abstraction. And now you still have the problem of, okay, this team works on that service. How do they know how they fit into the overall picture? So, it doesn't absolve you from the responsibility of communicating architecture, purpose, strategy, challenges, opportunities, all of those kinds of things. But without abstraction, we are completely drowned. So my answer always to that is where you can fit in the abstractions, whether you do it in terms of APIs or explanations or analogies or what have you. Those are the places where you start to get a leg up on the complexity and the big, kind of managing the big pieces that we have to manage. That's easy answer to a very complicated question, obviously, but.
Mitchell?
I like where you were going, Anders, because all of this to me represents this. This is actually an area where we do a lot of research around software delivery and tying the business and the technical organizations together. As software is elevated and become more of an essential ingredient of business strategies, digital transformation, all that kind of thing, the organization is much more reliant. In fact, they're betting the farm on their organization's ability to deliver software to themselves, through third parties, et cetera. At the same time, like in some of our research, one of the number one kind of things that gets in the way of really adopting DevOps and the organization working together is silos. That's been true forever. And it's still about people working together. And I think something that can help, and this question that was asked kind of hints maybe a little bit at it. A while back, somebody showed me or told me the phrase, we work in the business, we have to also work on the business. And that is, how do we work on what we do? And organizations outside of IT are very data driven. You go into marketing, product management, finance, all kinds of organizations are extremely data driven. Oftentimes IT isn't. But we now have a tool landscape, a software landscape, and architecture that's throwing off data exhaust. Lots of data about what we're doing and also what people are doing with our software. That if we can start to learn how to harness some of that, I think it can elevate, I hate to speak too grandiosely here, but I think it could help IT start to tie itself back to the metrics and the KPIs of the business that matter, instead of being the organization that's dragging us down or being slow or whatever, sort of stereotype from the past. And that's part of that working on the business. And this whole idea of all these architectures and multiple tools and software, et cetera. To manage all that, we need data. And I think if we can use that data in a productive way with the rest of the business and tie ourselves, use it to connect ourselves, that would be a healthy thing to work on.
Yeah, we've had plenty of success, although lots of work to be done still in terms of kind of down the cultural barriers and some of the silos between organizations. What we haven't succeeded at yet, but I think we're all working on, is making sure that we don't end up with a bunch of data silos, right? We've got, developers have their tools and QA has their tools, testing, ops, security, support, everybody has their own tools with a bunch of data in there. And what we really want to do is start to be able to ask and answer questions across those data silos. I think that's a challenge that we have on the vendor side of the industry, is to do a better job at pulling all of those things together.
I'd like to jump in. So first of all, I think a lot of what you guys are talking about, and it goes right to the heart of what DOI is all about, which is the human element, right? We can't lose sight of the fact that we could talk about QA and we could talk about security and we could talk about data, but it's humans and how they interact with it that we need to keep track of. I think one of the things that was really great about Agile and Scrum was the idea of your Scrum team being a manageable team, right? We didn't have this huge monstrosity. It was a manageable team. I think, you know, I think it was the Spotify model in DevOps, right? With squads, right? Squads. And these squads allowed us, it said you can, I forgot it was 7 or 11, right? Of people within a squad. I think the problem is it's okay to talk about dev everything ops up here at an organizational level. And when we get it down to the human level, to the team level, the humans just, the complexity, as the team gets larger, the complexity compounds. And I think that is where, you know, where you butt heads, where this dev everything ops kind of notion has trouble finding traction at that small team level. Now, I think one of the other issues, quite frankly, is with DevOps, instead of, yes, there's data silos, but we throw too much on the dev, right? The dev's going to do more testing, right? Wolfgang, I know at Tricentis, this is probably, yeah, I've spoken to Grigori about it. We keep throwing more on the dev. DevSecOps, we're going to shift security left and throw more security responsibility at those devs because they're the one working on it, right? The devs are human people, human beings. How much, and they've got a pretty hard job developing. How much more do we put on devs? How do we equal the load among our testing professionals, our security people who are underrepresented in the big thing? If dev everything ops is going to work, we need to figure that out. So interested in thoughts on that one.
Yeah, so I think we got to be honest on what we need to demand from our developers, and we don't want to be too overarchingly demanding. Compare it with a soccer team, right? You have at the very front, you have the Ronaldos and the Messis and guys who are here to shoot the goals, and then you have midfield and you have defense. So what do you expect from a developer? From a developer, I want to have offense. I want to have them run and shoot the goals, and I want to, of course, they need to have some prep from the midfield, right? So some architecture is also required. But do I really expect from them to be the greatest defenders on earth? I mean, if you focus if you focus on defense too much, you're going to break the offensive spirit of these guys, right? I mean, that doesn't prevent us from providing defense, but you have, somebody else is going to do that, and they're going to do it better because their entire mindset is defense. So if it's test as a defense discipline or it's security as a defense discipline, there are experts to do that make sure that you guys in midfield and in offense can perform to the extent possible. Then we're going to win the world championship. If I want Ronaldo to be a defensive soccer player, it's not going to work out. So that's the way I look at it.
I'm going to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
So just, as we're talking about this, a couple of thoughts come to mind. First of all, one of the things that, whether it's DevOps or Dev Everything Ops, that we're encouraging is systems thinking. And so everything that we're sharing here really does require us to elevate the way that we think more than even the way that we behave. And we have to all learn to become systems thinkers, whether you're a developer, whether you're an operations person, whether you're a CIO. We all need to be able to look at the whole system. And truthfully, growing up in IT, we didn't grow ourselves up that way. We grew ourselves up with blinders that we took care of a certain aspect of that. So I think systems thinking, design thinking is very important. And I think that's also one of the reasons why value stream management is starting to gain the popularity that it is, because we could take Dev Everything Ops, look at the value stream not as a flow chart, but look at it as here are all the essential elements that go back into this systems. Here's how long it takes to do it, but here's also the delays or the amount of time between these activities, and we can map. Mike Orson, who's pretty well known in the lean space, says that one of the best things to do with a value stream map is to socialize it, right? To get that kind of human interaction, to help people see the end-to-end system so that they can see, first of all, that they're a part of it, and that includes the business, but they can see that they're a part of it. They can also see what elements, for example, Wolfgang, you're talking about testing, Caroline, with security, you know, that whole shift left movement requires a very, very different mentality, right? That before it was somebody else's problem, now it's everybody's responsibility. So I think that that changes it. And Alan, just to go back to pizza, it's a 2-pizza team. So Jim, you were going, is it 7 or 9? It's the old 2-pizza team, right? You should never have a team that can eat 2 pizzas. So that's
the Amazon model, exactly. The Jeff Bezos. Yep.
And systems thinking, value stream management, I think have started to really rise to the forefront, because that's how we're going to solve this problem. And everything that's involved in that is going to hopefully be represented and not underrepresented in those solutions.
And I think we should point out too, I think that, you know, when we say shift left, a lot of times that gets interpreted as dev will do it, right? And I think that feeds in a little bit to the myth of the full stack developer, and that, you know, in order for us to succeed at software, our developers have to be security experts, they have to be quality experts, they have to be user experience experts, ops experts, all of these things. And that's kind of as far from the truth of reality as you could possibly get. You know, you want full stack teams, full stack organizations, and the supermen and superwomen who kind of can range all over the place are typically great systems thinkers and so on. But anytime you set things up requiring or expecting that your developers will do everything under the sun, and that's what shift left means, as opposed to, you know, do it earlier and do it often, which is the way I think about it. You're setting yourself up for failure there, and you're not going to be able to staff that organization with the superhumans the way you think you are. So you're gonna meet reality pretty hard on that way.
And what a waste it would be, right? Because see, you have somebody who is perfect in 3 disciplines, okay? If I use this person just for one thing, I'm not making use of 2 elements where this person is perfect in. What a waste! We want to make sure that people can perform where they're best at, and not try to throw everything on them. It's just a waste.
And on top of that, Wolfgang, what we pay developers today, right? And I don't begrudge them what they're making, but I have friends who are CIOs, CTOs, and they're paying developers $250,000 a year or more because they're a good developer. To go have them doing, and I don't mean this in a bad, disparaging way, but to have them doing security or testing or some of the other things rather than developing, which they are amazing at, what a waste of money and talent and time.
Correct,
right?
Correct. See, Ronaldo makes 200 million a year, right?
Yeah.
You know, any defense player who is close to that? Anyone in defense? I mean, nobody is close to that, and for good reason. It's not.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not sound fair, but it is.
That's the reality. But there's a flip side, and Jeff from our audience brought this up in the questions section, which is, we haven't discussed SREs. So are SREs a way for operations to kind of even the load with the developer a little bit, take some of that load off and handle it, in that traditional maybe ops way, and we call it SREs. Thoughts on SREs, Jane? I know you guys recently did a skill up day on SRE, and thoughts on that?
So I'm a little passionate about SRE coming from the ops space because I think it broadens operations, but I also think it brings us continuous operations much earlier. And again, when we start to look at the rise of SRE and the history behind it, I think it's pretty fascinating because it didn't grow up as part of DevOps, right? We didn't coin SRE because somebody in the DevOps space thought of, wow, I think we ought to include operations in this. So I do think SRE offloads some of the work on the developers. In some ways, I think it adds additional work for the developers, because the classic definition of SRE is what happens when a software engineer tackles operations, right? So there we go. We're still in the developer space. But I guess I would throw it out to everybody, whether it's SRE. Isn't everybody at some point today a developer? And so if we take away the classic definition of a software engineer, it doesn't everybody in that value stream. I'm not a coder, right? I've never been a coder, but little kids are learning Python, right? So I think, SREs are learning Python. I think that an engagement very early from an SRE, from an SRE team has really kind of changed the dynamic of who self-identifies as a developer and who self-identifies as operations now.
Charlene, what about security? Can we have security SREs? I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I have a broader response. And one of the cool things about my chief strategy officer role at Cobalt is that I actually oversee cybersecurity as well as people, which is what we use to describe human resources. And that's very unusual. And as I listen to this, several things occur to me. One of them is I am so reminded of that character in the Phoenix Project, the one individual who can sort of do everything and is sort of forced into doing everything and is burning out. Right. And I think there's an organizational strategy opportunity, if you will, to identify who are the high value contributors in the organization. Now, we've all been parts of organizations where engineers are gods, or sales are gods, or, pick your preferred business department. In my opinion, that doesn't work. I don't think it actually works to devalue any particular role in an organization. And I think that is where the politics comes in. I think that politics is a natural outcome of human beings getting together. Anytime you have more than 3 individuals together, you're going to naturally have politics, and that's okay. I think that one of the coolest things, and this is a strange thing to say, but one of the coolest things about being a human resources professional is that I have a lot of influence in terms of who we hire and who we fire. And what that means is that we as an organization and our hiring managers have an opportunity to examine, do the candidates that we interview and do the folks that we bring on board and have as a part of our team, do they actually live our company values? And our values don't include putting one department or another on a pedestal and having everyone else be subservient to them. So I think that if you're in a situation like that, and that is extraordinarily common, then you've got to think about how to work around it. I think if you have an opportunity to consider the organizational design, and maybe if there are folks who are stealing the spotlight when they're not supposed to, you address that behavior. It's not a simple fix, but I think it's an important one. I'm a big fan of this book called Sapiens. And this book, Sapiens, talks about this concept, which others I'm sure are familiar with, Dunbar's number. The idea that, you can sort of ensure consistency of values and behaviors between individuals via one-to-one relationships until a group reaches about 100. Which is to say, it's a lot easier to manage a group of less than 100 people than it is to manage a group of more than 100 people. When you get to more than 100 people, these things can't simply be managed via one-to-one relationships anymore. They have to be documented. They have to be instituted. One of the things that we do is an every 6-month performance review that includes both expectations for an individual's department and role level, as well as an evaluation, including peer feedback, of demonstration of company values. And that's something we take extremely seriously. We've let company executives go because they were not demonstrating company values. And I like to think that that's one of the reasons why we've been able to support a truly collaborative culture, and not one where we say it's collaborative, but where we actually value one person way more than another.
That's great. And that is almost DevOps. You know, Wolfgang, you founded Tricentis. You were there when you were less than 100 people. I know you're well over 100 now, right? Caroline's experience to your experience in building the organization here, trying to keep that DevOps culture, if you will, that culture of being agile, maybe with a small a, not a big A, but whatever. What do you think?
Yeah, so when I look back, actually, there were several steps that changed the company entirely. Several thresholds, not just the 100 and 100 plus, but there are some below, right? Until 20, you're like family. But then becoming more than 20, the family spirit kind of erodes. I would say the next step is about 80 or so, or 100, somewhere in that ballpark, and then things change again. Regarding the agile spirit, I think that's also very much related to the complexity topic that you have addressed earlier. I think we always want to, even if we grow an organization, still have areas of family spirit going, not then producing silos. Yeah, you mentioned the silo issue, Mitch, right? But still have some family spirit going. I think that is super relevant, and even and the idea of agile with teams actually supports that spirit. But what we also need to be very cautious is that these families do not produce their own little islands, which all of a sudden become little fiefdoms and tend to build their own walls around them and do not interact with the company anymore. I've seen this in our own organization.
Oh, right.
So we always need to also make sure that we have some, so to say, apologies for my word, disturb the systems, right? Like make sure that some exchange is always going in order to make sure we do not run into this fiefdom phenomenon. I personally think that while I fully respect the relevance of each and every employee, we need to be aware that some employees are more critical than others. It is the blunt truth. It is just a fact. Otherwise, we will also lose great talent. It is a fact, especially in software development. As you know, the capabilities of software developers spread by magnitudes, and you would still not fire somebody. If somebody has a 10x output, you would still not fire the one with a 1x output. That's the way it scales here. And fortunately, we do not fully represent this inequality in payments. Of course we don't, right? By far not. Mm-hmm. But we want to be aware, because it's going to be your A players that make you win, nobody else. And it's always stunning to me how little extraordinary people in a company it takes to win. And if you can go up to Google, you can go up to the largest company on the planet, and you're going to find just 15, 20 extraordinary people who run the ship, right? Or 8, or even 8. Yeah. So it's just not true that there is no difference. There is huge difference, but we want to make sure that somehow we can orchestrate all the strings. Sorry for the long answer.
No, it's fine. It goes back to the humans, right? It's a human element thing, and I think, you know, humans, everyone should have a minimum level of respect, responsibility, but we also have to realize that, you know, in our societies and in our jobs, some people do better than others at their jobs, and that's okay. And theoretically, they're compensation is somehow, tied into that. Guys, we're almost out of time. First of all, I want to just thank each of you. Mitch Ashley from Accelerated Strategies Group, Anders Walgren from CloudBees, Jane Grohl from the humans over at the Devops Institute, Wolfgang Platz, founder, Chief Strategy Officer, Tricentis, and also thanks Tricentis for sponsoring today. We can't do this without sponsors, so many, many thanks to Tricentis. And last but not least, certainly my good friend Caroline Wong, Caroline, Chief Strategy Officer at Cobalt.io. One quick question, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, for our audience, if they want to find out more about Dev Everything Ops, a book, a paper, a presentation, somewhere to go where they can go find out more. Caroline, I'm going to put you on the spot first.
Sure. I've got a couple. One is State of Penetration Testing 2020. Another is A Practitioner's Guide to Application Security, which I've also shared in the chat.
Fantastic. Wolfgang?
I have come up with a book on enterprise continuous testing. I would very selfishly recommend you to read it. It's, I think, just like 3 to 4 hours to go through, but it's going to give you a very comprehensive overview about what continuous testing in the DevOps space means.
Thank you. Anders?
I think the Devops Handbook is a wonderful resource, and I keep going back to that one for kind of inspiration and nuggets of goodness. So I recommend that one.
Mitch?
I'm not saying this for self-serving purposes, but there actually are a number of articles on devops.com. I think some going back as early as like 2017, 18. Check those out, because I think that shows some of the evolution of the thinking around this, and that context is helpful.
Last but not least, Jane.
So Devops Institute has introduced a set of new collaborative body of knowledge known as playbooks, and the first one is the Devops Journey. And so it's very non-traditional. It looks at where you are and how you play in this. So go up to the Devops Institute website, become a free member. The Devops Journey playbook is a curation as well as some thought leadership, and embraces some of the content that some of you have already mentioned.
Great. Hey, just real quick, every webinar we do here, we always give out Amazon gift cards. So we've got a couple of winners, Cliff F, Dean C, Janet B, and Randall S. Our team will reach out to you and get you your Amazon gift cards. Thanks for participating. My panel, what a great panel. We'll come back, we'll do this again. Similar topic, we can talk all day on these. Thank you so much. Thank everyone for attending. If you're watching this on demand, sorry you weren't able to participate in the Q&A. Maybe you'll catch us on the next one in about a month. But for now, this is Alan Schimmel from Media Ops. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great day. We're out.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and TechStrong.tv.
Next up, as I mentioned, we're going to go back in the archives of DevOps experience from this past October. And if you haven't seen this woman present before, you're in for a treat. Her name is Raven Manuel. She has a great backstory. I actually interviewed her for the GitLab Commit event over the summer. If you can catch that on DevOps experience, on Digital Anarchist, rather, you should check it out because she gives a little bit of her background. But what an inspirational story Raven Manuel is, not just for women out there or people of color, but for anyone who has decided they want to do something with their lives and contribute. Raven, to me, is a poster child. I mean, she comes from the Bronx. There was no DevOps when she started going to school and getting involved in the IT world, obviously. But what a success she's been in many ways. Here's Raven Manuel of Smithsonian Institute on No Legacy DevOps, Lessons Learned and Learning.
Hello, and thank you for joining me today for my discussion on No Legacy DevOps, Lessons Learned and Learning. I'm Raven Manuel, and I am going to, here's our agenda. I'll talk to you a little bit about myself and where I'm coming from, the start state for my organization, because this is a story, a tale of my organization, the current state, end state, and then have some time, if there is some time, for Q&A. And so a little bit about the Smithsonian Institution, which is where I work. It was founded and established from funds from James Smithson, a British scientist who left his estate to the United States for the establishment, for the increase and diffusion of knowledge. We have 19 museums, 21 libraries, the National Zoo, numerous education, and 9 research centers. And so we are bigger than just the castle. So if you've not come and seen us, please join us and visit everything, which will take you your whole lifetime. I personally work for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is the only national museum devoted exclusively for the documentation of African American history and culture. It is the 19th and newest museum. It was established by Act of Congress in 2003, and we opened our doors. We just had our 4th year anniversary in September 24th. So in 2016 is when we opened. We have over 40,000 artifacts and 100,000 members. It is an experience of a lifetime, and we just recently opened about a month ago. So get your pass. You have to get a time pass to come visit us, and I would suggest that you do that just to get an experience of who we are. Who am I? I was sworn into duty as a senior application developer and DevOps engineer for the museum on January 9th in 2017. I am the principal developer responsible for the implementation of the hands-on interactive scattered throughout the museum. I'm also the DevOps lead, and I'm responsible for defining the standards, workflows, and recommending the appropriate tools to my leadership, and which our development teams, in which we have many, adopt or adapt to produce the museum's digital products. I also serve as the primary administrator of the agency's cloud-based resources. And this is our story. When I was thinking about this talk, I was thinking about how we would do infinite states, like finite state machines, where you would have like a start state and intermediate states. And I thought, our journey for the DevOps has infinite states, where we are, our journey starts and is starting. We're still here at a place where we don't have legacy. We don't have old systems. We opened in 2016, so therefore anything that we have is no more than about 4 years old, no more than a toddler. We use shared services, or we have services that we get from OCIO that we use for our internal stuff. And for our external systems, we don't have any custom built or hand-me-down applications. We don't have mainframes, we don't have code base written in dead languages, and we don't have any turnkey projects. And so you would think that this would be the ideal situation for starting a DevOps journey. We were also born digital, so that means that we have this shared vision of a digital museum, and our desire is for the open access for all our collection materials for our visitors. So our viewpoint, our perspective is about leveraging the emerging technologies for the web, so that anyone, if you can't make it to the Smithsonian and to our museum, you'd be able to access it from online. And we recently launched the open access, where you can reach many of our collection items, not just our museum, but for our other museums and galleries, for us to all form a one Smithsonian, which is the vision, is that we are one Smithsonian, and regardless of where you are, you can visit and have that experience or something similar. And so we were born digital. We were born without any legacy. We were also born without any done. So at that point, we really were not thinking DevOps. I was hired in year half. Actually, it was before year one, right after opening. And our whole thing at that point was to educate via informative, delightful, and thought-provoking content. And so our content, most of that we were trying to get out on the web at that point, was to be unique and enlightening and educational. Year two, which was just a couple of years back, we continue to deliver on that promise of being delightful and delivering these unique experiences, but we started maturing, and which is where we are in year three as we enter year four, a transition from a disruptive to a chaos to a more stabilized chaos, where the museum is it's still pretty new. Some people I keep telling me that they want to visit, but they have not had an opportunity to visit. But we still are at a point where our digital products, the things that we want to do, are still in this transition where we want to bring people in and delight them, because that is the word of the day, to be delightful. So our start state for our DevOps experience was with progressive leadership that wanted to make all our content accessible via the web, which was very important. We were having world and future focus, which is a museum without walls. And we started with a clean slate, a 22nd century perspective, where anything was fine, everything is possible, and just if you can think it and it was feasible, then let's go for it. And that is where we started, a nice clean slate where you could just roll out the DevOps carpet and just get started. However, that is not the case. If anyone has gone from an environment where you are being reactive, where you're trying to get things done, and most of your mode is reactive, you would find that your processes are not well developed. They're kind of guerrilla taped together. You are trying to put together these steps to get things done, and there are gaps. If things are working or they're not working, but if they're working and even if they're kludgy, then you're just like, leave it alone, we'll revisit it later. Because we were trying to get so much out there, it was more in our group, yes, 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 we can do this, yes, we can do that. And when you have a yes, yes, yes culture, then what tends to happen is that you don't have a lot of onboarding. You don't have an onboarding process that actually critically looks at what it is that you're doing, and you're starting to do, like, you're just saying, I'm going to get this done, and you don't think about the process, you don't think about the steps, you just are going to get it done, which is why things become guerrilla tape, because you do have some processes that are working, some that are working but are not really efficient, and you still go with it. And it is a reactive way of working. In DevOps, in this journey, I've learned that it's not for reactivity. DevOps is a way of being proactive, and I am a proactive thinker. And when you're doing DevOps, being reactive is kind of anticlimactic. It's not a way for you to be able to get anything done sufficiently, efficiently, or proactively. The challenges and the lessons that we're learning and that we've learned is that, one, the biggest was that about commitment, where everyone recognized the the value that DevOps and going through the DevOps way is going to bring to the organization. The dev teams, although we are a unit, which a lot of our dev teams are contractors. They bring their own ways of working into the environment. We don't try to pin people down and say you have to do X, Y, and Z, but it becomes a challenge when you've got that embedded thinking and you are trying to break that embedded thinking. People see that the change is going to be good, and then you have to try to get them to commit. And even those of us, we were very flexible, even erring on the side of flexibility still did not make this work. Poorly executed or lack of processes create barriers. It makes it so that you're not able to change, you're not able to move forward, you're not able to even add to the workflow, added a couple of automated steps to our workflow, and it came out that our processes were too brittle. The way the teams were working was a little bit too brittle. And the biggest takeaway from it all is that stepping back is good. Stepping back, regrouping, and using a different approach to be able to get things done and to be able to implement a DevOps process is a very successful strategy, because that is what we've done. We've actually have stopped, and now we're going through a revamp of our website. We're going through a revamp of some of our digital interactives. And now that COVID's here, we're actually reviewing our interactives that are touch so that we can make them contactless. These things all have to be, they're all these different processes, all these different projects that need to be done in a more consistent way. And so we stepped back and we started to look. So how can we implement a strategy that focuses on a consistent, repeatable process when many of our projects are one-offs, which is the biggest challenge that we've got to overcome? How do we allow our dev teams, which are, again, contracted resources, sufficient space to follow their workflow and then facilitate their ways of working, but again, have processes that are consistent and repeatable across the teams? And how can we ensure that all that is good and great about DevOps and all of the trimmings that flow with it are part of the workflow for all our dev teams without trying to force that down their throats? This is what is the issue. We needed a process, a strategy, a DevOps strategy that's adaptable and flexible. So this is where my front end, I'm a full stack developer. My front end mind thought about design patterns, and there are design patterns in software engineering as well. But one specific design pattern, the atomic design, which is a methodology thought of by Brad Frost in his atomic design, where it is to create interfaces or a design system that are deliberate and hierarchical in manner, and having a hierarchy and being able to step through this hierarchy in order to make a consistent pattern is a way to solve that business problem, which is what Brad Frost was trying to solve, is create user interfaces and more contacts using more browsers and more devices, more screen sizes and more capabilities, but in a way that's deliberate and hierarchical to adapt and be flexible to a business environment and its needs in a way that's consistent and repeatable. And this is where the DevOps design pattern that I've designed for our organization actually comes into play. It has two major components. One component being the product development strategy, which maps to the CI part of the DevOps workflow, the product delivery strategy, which maps to CD, the continuous delivery, continuous integration being CI, continuous delivery being CD. And those are the primary components of the design pattern. The DevOps team itself is the service delivery. There's a service delivery strategy that works with the DevOps team. And our DevOps team is actually something akin to, if you've seen the Mission Impossible movies, where they get the team together, but they only get together the pieces that they need. They have a core group of people, and then they bring the other people that are specialists in their fields. And that's what we do in our particular unit. We've got myself as the DevOps lead, and I have a system administrator and a security manager, but we all have our day jobs, and we work on our projects outside of the project timeline. And when a project is spun up, we are there at the very beginning, before kickoff, to ensure that whatever is needed for the project, as far as from the DevOps perspective, is available. The DevOps knowledge domains, security, governance and compliance, accessibility, testing and metrics, tooling, risk management, these are all key DevOps knowledge domains that whenever we're thinking about our design pattern it goes together hand in hand, and we document them, which is a very important thing. So document the DevOps strategy. This is facilitated by a communication plan, a requirements document, and technical specifications. So there is this DevOps strategy, this guide that goes from project to project that looks at the knowledge domains and checks that they are been talked about at minimum, whether they need to be done in-depthly or on a surface level, depending on the project. This ensures that all of the good things of DevOps have been looked at, have been considered for each and every project, and have been documented and captured in a centralized document repository, where we keep these documents, and that way we have an artifacts and a historical archive of all the things that we've thought about for a particular project, so we can revisit it. So our design pattern is made in the spirit of atomic design. At the very end, the end state that we're trying for is this minimal viable DevOpness, this place where our onboarding process evaluates the project via the lens of a DevOps design patterns, which consists of the two main components, the service delivery, as well as those knowledge domains, and structure the appropriate DevOps strategy and efficient ways of working in order to achieve incremental and continuous efficiencies. This is how we feel we reach minimum viable DevOpness. Thank you very much for for attending and listening to me give our story and talk about our journey.
Okay, thanks, Raven. I hope you enjoyed that. Raven Manuel will be on a future episode of DevOps Unbound as well. Next up, we have our Chief Content Officer, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has news around the MediaOps site. She has a great webinar preview and not one, but two videos today. Her videos are with Steve George and Mark Ram of Weaveworks, the folks behind Gitops, and then Jen Miller-Osborne of Palo Alto Networks, Unit 42 research team, about some malware-infected apps up on Google Play. You hate hearing those stories, but let's take it over to Charlene.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the Monday edition of the news headlines. First up on DevOps.com, we have an interesting article that takes a look at the synergies that exist between big data and DevOps. The concept of big data has been around for a good 10 years or so, and DevOps isn't that far behind, but rarely are they used together. Perhaps that should change. Big data can provide incredible insight into the way applications are behaving in the wild and being consumed via usage patterns. That's especially relevant today in the pandemic, when just about everything is shifted to online and the user experience is critical. The changes caused by the pandemic, both in consumer behavior and in the way that organizations communicate internally, have given developers an appreciation of the value of the data that analytics teams hold. This article takes a deep look at how big data can be super helpful in DevOps and offers some examples of how organizations can use the two together. We also have an article on what organizations need to know when choosing a cloud provider for their IoT implementations. As more IoT initiatives are being spun up to automate processes and bring a level of intelligence to ways of working, the choice of a cloud provider is crucial. IoT engineering tends to be more complex and compute intensive, which makes them excellent candidates for cloud-native development platforms. The right cloud platform can help accelerate the launch of an IoT project and reduce the risks that are associated with rollouts. At the same time, cloud-native development should also increase efficiencies through the development cycle, which both speeds things up and lowers costs. This article takes a look at the considerations necessary in choosing the right cloud platform provider for IoT implementations to ensure success on multiple levels. We also have a preview of the Devops Institute's Devops Institute Skill Up Global Festival, which is happening December 7th through 11th. That is just so easy for me to say. If you haven't heard of the DOI Skill Up events, they are chock full of goodness in learning, information sharing, networking, and community participation around a particular topic. This last one of 2020 promises to blow off the roof, virtually of course, with 4 days dedicated to the humans of DevOps. That's you guys. The agenda will include a variety of different activities that focus on social, professional, and educational experiences. It also features a deep dive into technology trends and presents career advancement opportunities. So no matter where you are on your DevOps journey and what you're looking for, a new job, social outreach with like-minded people, perhaps a mentor, this event is one not to miss. Check out this article on devops.com to find out how to register, or just head on over to devopsinstitute.com. All right, over on Container Journal, we have news of a report from Provazio that says more than half of the container images in Docker Hub have critical vulnerabilities. Yikes. That's based on a scan of 4 million images for 1 month using 800 machines running in parallel that the company did via its behavioral analytics tool designed for containers. Another 13% of the container images scanned had high vulnerabilities, and 4% had moderate vulnerabilities. The report shows that a higher level of security hygiene must be applied in the application development process. Developers should not assume container images on public registries are secure enough to reuse without first being scanned for malware. Considering the increased amount of containers that are being used in the development process these days, security must be top of mind. Speaking of security, over on Security Boulevard, we have a slightly harrowing article describing how nation-states and other organizations have begun targeting the COVID-19 vaccine supply chain. Just last week, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency issued an alert highlighting the threat posed by malicious actors targeting various points within the supply chain to harvest account credentials. In the crosshairs are the European Commission Director General for Taxation and Customs, the energy sector, and the IT sector. That shows attackers are targeting not only the entire supply chain but also certain elements, including a solar panel manufacturer, which is being used to harvest energy for the cold chain refrigeration units. It's thought that the entities are targeting the supply chain to leapfrog their efforts in getting a vaccine to market by stealing intellectual property. No particular entity has been fingered as the perpetrator, but China is highly suspected because of its past efforts to target vaccine development in the U.S. This is a developing story, so no doubt we'll be hearing a lot more about it soon. And speaking of the pandemic, and who isn't, We close out today's headlines with an article that highlights the various ways that hackers are targeting work-from-home environments and what organizations can do to keep their employees protected. This is a regular theme on Security Boulevard, but it bears repeating because many states are once again instituting mandatory lockdowns and employees are back to work from home if they ever left. This article offers up what organizations need to do from a technology perspective to shore up their security efforts and more. Solutions such as endpoint management and network visibility can go a long way in helping organizations stay on top of new and emerging threats to their data and their employees. According to the article, the end goal should be to incorporate resilience into the distributed workforce to reduce the ways in which they could be compromised. All right, to wrap things up, just a quick reminder that the finalists for the annual DevOps Dozen Awards have been announced. So check out the list over on devops.com and cast your vote for the winners in all 24 categories. That's a 2 dozen. Deadline for voting is January 8th. But with the holidays upon us, vote early before you forget. All right, that's all that I have for today. Please check back tomorrow. We'll have lots more news headlines for you. But until then, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with two very smart gentlemen. The first is Steve George, who is the Chief Operations Officer at Weaveworks, and Mark Ram, who is Director of Product Management. Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Hey, nice to see you.
We are here now to talk about the latest version of the Weaveworks Kubernetes platform, version 2.4. Guys, tell me all about it. What's so great about this version?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2.4, we've been seeing some changes in the way that people use Kubernetes. So something you might know about Weaveworks is that we coined the term Gitops to provide a operating model around Kubernetes. And so what we mean by that is the problem of when you're running Kubernetes, either the clusters or the applications, you need to update them, you need to upgrade them, you want to deploy new versions of the applications. From time to time you have problems and you need to be able to debug and solve those. So in 2.4, what we've been seeing is that people are running more Kubernetes clusters on a variety of different backends, both on-premise and in the cloud. And then on their clusters, they're running more applications. So as Kubernetes makes its way into customers' estates, into their enterprises, they start using it for a whole variety of different applications, different business units use it, different teams use it. And so what we're finding is that they might have 10, 15, 20, 200 clusters, and they're running more and more applications on those clusters. So with 2.4, we've been trying to solve or work towards solving that problem, making it really efficient and effective to manage those applications and manage those clusters using our Gitops capability.
Excellent, excellent. So, one of the things that we see a lot on Container Journal is the fact that container adoption is obviously on the rise, and as is the adoption of Kubernetes. But Kubernetes is notoriously complex to manage, and so what do you guys hope to address with this update of your platform that will actually kind of reduce the amount of complexity of using a Kubernetes and adopting it in container environments?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, one of the ways in which things have changed now is that people are already using Kubernetes. And so what we find is that people are using it, on Amazon, say with EKS. Some parts of their enterprise might be using it on premise, with something like OpenShift or Tanzu. You might be, across your business using it in a variety of different backends. So we've been working on this feature called Gitops Everywhere. And the idea is that you can bring Gitops to your existing Kubernetes clusters. So if you're using a Rancher cluster, you can add Gitops. You do not need to redeploy the whole of those clusters, and it will work with any of the sort of validated Kubernetes backends. So then you get the sort of power of Gitops, the ability to easily manage the configuration, the ability to do updates and upgrades of your applications. We'll talk about team workspaces in a moment, this really easy way to deploy applications. You get all of that benefit, but you can apply it to any Kubernetes cluster without having to redeploy the clusters, right from the start again.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Mark, I want to invite you into the conversation as well. Tell me, what you are perhaps most excited about with this particular update to the platform.
I think the most exciting feature to me is Team Workspaces and the new version of Team Workspaces, which is a feature designed to bring GitOps to enterprise level customers, where you need multiple teams who have access to different workloads in different clusters, and you need to manage who can control what where. And in GitOps, you need to manage that both in Git repositories that define the cluster workload definitions and manage those over time, and in Kubernetes, so that the team can go in and look at the Kubernetes API and see the things that they're supposed to be able to debug. And previous to Team Workspaces, this was something that people had to set up manually.
Okay.
But now we can go in and create repositories in GitHub or GitLab, create namespaces in clusters anywhere, and then line those things up so that when people commit a new workload into the repository, that it automatically gets deployed into the cluster, and everybody has exactly the permissions that they should have. And that, combined with the feature that Steve mentioned already, the GitOps Anywhere, where you can install this into any cluster, means that you can manage large, complex, heterogeneous fleets in the cloud, on the edge, in the data center, all using Git repositories on GitHub or in GitLab, and have no real need to know the details of where that cluster lives and how it is set up. Your team can just do what they need to do.
That's great. And I would imagine that that's such a breakthrough for DevOps teams who are managing so many different Kubernetes clusters, and just having that whole process streamlined for them has got to be a huge bonus. So tell me a little bit about the profile of your customers. Who is it who's using this particular technology, and are you seeing any changes in that profile as more containers are being adopted and more organizations are kind of shifting to that environment?
Yeah, surely I'll start, and then Mark can give more detail. So I think what we see at the moment is this kind of the shift is starting to happen where people are hitting problems around complexity. So, I think that we are still in a circumstance in the containerized world where there are more people starting today operating applications on Kubernetes than the entire rest of everybody else who is already doing that. So there are still more new users out there. But as we move forward, we're seeing more people who are in a circumstance where they're running many applications. So we talk about this as being either sort of horizontal complexity or vertical complexity. So sort of horizontal complexity where you talk to customers and they want to be in multiple cloud environments, or they want to be on-premise and in the cloud. And so we think that GitOps provides an ability to manage that across all those different backends. And we talk about CAPI and what that value that is bringing. And then the other thing that we see is this sort of other form of complexity where it's many teams running many applications. And I think, with the sorts of users that are starting to use Kubernetes as an application platform, their goal is to operate their application rather than to become Kubernetes experts. So I think something like Team Workspaces is trying to make Kubernetes accessible to this, new set of users that are focused on their application. And the last thing that's driving is a general change to the sorts of different applications that people are starting to use Kubernetes for. Well, I'd say, an extension, right? People were only using it for stateless, and now stateful is much more common. We see different sorts of workloads in customers.
Excellent.
And a year ago, we saw a lot of people who were struggling to get a cluster up and running and deploy their first workload. And we still see those folks. That's still a huge group of people. But we also, a lot of times, are seeing people who have quite a bit of Kubernetes experience, but are looking to scale that out to more and more groups. And there's a struggle in that there's not enough people who understand Kubernetes. And so anything that we can do to help onboard those people more quickly and easily is really valuable to our customers.
Do you see the container and Kubernetes adoption, on the rise? Do you see more organizations adopting this technology and in greater numbers, or are we still kind of at this kind of steady incline of adoption?
Well, I think we had a good increase in adoption going. I think there was a little bump due to COVID, but even through that, we saw an increase in adoption. And we have seen, lately an even greater increase again. And I just expect that is continuing.
Yeah, I think the productivity benefits for development teams, and the ability to ultimately to run your application and not spend lots of time building infrastructure is so significant. And, in some of our enterprise customers, they're really seeing the reliability benefit as well. So not just, development teams to use Kubernetes and containers, but the actual operations teams are seeing, the mean time to recovery stats are so good that they're starting to say, or are saying, actually this is a good platform for reliability as much as for speed. So we've seen that in some of the sort of enterprise customers.
Okay. So what do you guys see as kind of the, as adoption is rising and more organizations are becoming comfortable with using Kubernetes, what's the next step? What comes next for these organizations? Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, this is my personal opinion, but
sure.
Kubernetes provides a great declarative model for saying, I want to deploy this workload and run it in this way. But it doesn't provide an operational model for tracking changes over time. Git provides a great way to track changes over time. And the combination of Kubernetes and GitOps is, Steve mentioned mean time to recovery being really good. And we've had customers who were using Kubernetes and had a mean time to recovery increase of more than 100% when they added GitOps to that, because they could then see what was happening, why and when, and track all of that and understand how to get. And also, because everything is declared in Git, you can roll back to an earlier version. And all of that means that we can get mean time to recovery down to a much lower number, which for most people makes a big difference in your overall numbers.
Yeah, I think we're still continuing. The next stage for Kubernetes, like all of these sorts of movements, is we need to make it as straightforward to use as possible, and that will continue. I mean, that will be something we'll continue to talk about for probably a long period of time. So, at the moment, people can plug together a variety of technologies to get a great platform. But there's probably still, a lot of things out there that require that expert knowledge. So I think we're going to be talking about that. For Weaveworks, we talk about GitOps, and we fundamentally believe that changes the angle on that. But I think generally speaking, for every new technology ecosystem that I've worked in my career, we see this sort of Cambrian explosion of new capabilities, and then we have a settle down period. And I think progressively people move forward. So we're seeing a lot of interest in mentioning progressive deployment of applications, increasing the reliability of applications, whether deployment phase, continuous delivery, service meshes, those sorts of things. Those are problems that you can move forward into when you've got the basics of the core platform running.
All right. So version 2.4, available, December 1st. Any final thoughts on the technology before we shut things down here?
No, I mean, I think the other thing that we're talking about in the industry a lot at the moment is the ability to install Kubernetes anywhere on these different backends. So you've seen a lot of that. So I think this is just the general trend continuing of, how to use Kubernetes wherever you need it, and how to use GitOps, at least for us, how to use GitOps wherever you need it. So we're excited to see people use it, try it out, give us feedback, and we're hoping that it'll be a nice step up for everyone.
Excellent. All right. Hey, well, guys, thanks so much for walking me through the latest version. I see great things with this version, and I appreciate your time and your insight. So thanks again for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Jen Miller-Osborne, who's the Deputy Director of Threat Intelligence for Unit 42 at Palo Alto Networks. Hey Jen, thanks for joining me today. Really great to see you.
Hi, yeah, it's good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the research that you guys have been doing. Just amazing stuff all the way around. But one of the things that has popped up lately is a number of apps that you guys found that were actually collecting users' personal information, and they were they were found to be traced back to Baidu, which is a Chinese firm. Is that right?
Yes, they weren't the only apps we found that were collecting that kind of data, but they were two that had the largest user bases, which is why we felt it was a bit significant. There's potentially 6 million people have downloaded these apps, so it had a lot of just user awareness was a big driver for this blog.
Okay, all right. So give us a little bit of background. What is it that you guys found exactly, and what do folks need to know about this?
So a couple of our researchers were curious just to see. They wanted to look into Android apps, especially ones that were particularly popular, and just kind of see what they were doing and see if they were doing anything like in the background that maybe would be something users would want to be aware of. It was just a curiosity thing. And while they were doing that, they uncovered a number of different apps that were collecting sensitive data on users. And it's not that they were necessarily doing it without the user's consent. It's in the terms of service somewhere. The issue is that it's not explicitly called out. So users can be aware that this sensitive data, including for some of the apps, they were collecting the IMEI, and that means it's tied directly to a phone. So when you switch SIM cards or things like that, that data remains static. So someone could, track you for that. And there are a lot of reasons companies like to collect that data. One of the things I found convenient initially, and then I turned off because I found it weird, was Google Maps has this feature where if you let it collect your data, it starts giving you suggestions. Right? Mm-hmm. Hey, traffic is bad. You might want to leave earlier or take a different route. Do you want to call your Starbucks in order now because usually you leave about this time of day? And that's really convenient for a lot of users, but it's something that we feel you should explicitly know that you're opting into. It shouldn't be something that's buried somewhere in the terms of service and realistically, no one ever reads all of them. So you click them and you say yes because you want the app. So it was, just to let people be aware, because that can be sensitive data. If you opt into it and you're fine with it because you like the advantages or the targeted ads or whatever you're getting back from it, that's fine. But, from a security perspective and even a personal security perspective, that's the kind of thing that you should explicitly know that you're sharing externally.
Okay. All right. So basically these apps, well, at least some of them were tracking folks' kind of locations at all time. Is that what it is? And I would imagine with that information, you could kind of develop a profile of what the person does on a regular basis. And that could lead to all kinds of security implications there.
Exactly. There's something, we actually published research a little while ago looking into GPS and how that data is shared from phones and how that can be used in a similar manner, to track people and to track their locations, and how, that's good and bad. A lot of families have these apps now where you can see where everyone is at any given time, and that's great. But there's also another application of those, which is called stalkerware, which is where people use this kind of data abusively. So it's something people just need to, consciously know that they're sharing and be aware of it, so they know what kind of risk they might be taking. And know that some of these apps, when they share this data, when they're sending it over the wire, it's not necessarily encrypted. So that means that potentially someone else, if they're aware the apps share this data, could also collect that on you without your knowledge. Yeah. So it's just,
it's kind of interesting in a bad way. I think that, these applications really do have the ability to, basically let the world know where you are at any given time, and for better or for worse. I think about things like just even like Facebook, that they'll let everybody else know when you happen to be online by that little green dot. It's like, oh, she's online at this particular moment. And to me, that's kind of invasive. Sometimes I don't want folks to know, whether I'm checking my Facebook status or whatever, but it seems to me that just these little things here and there kind of add up to a huge what could be perceived by many as a huge invasion of privacy. It's like our lives are not our own anymore because of these apps. Are we seeing just, I don't know, it just seems like to the average person it probably doesn't mean a whole lot, but taken collectively, we've got a major privacy issue on our hands. So what do you think, is going to happen? I mean, are things going to get worse as far as privacy is concerned before things get better and we actually can kind of control our privacy more?
I hope not. I do think that's a possibility. That's one of the reasons we really wanted to kind of highlight this research and some of the other ones we've done into this, is so I think with more user awareness, there's the potential to kind of put more of the onus back on the developers and the people making these devices, saying, we want to explicitly understand how secure our data is, what's being collected, how it's being collected, how is it being deleted or stored, all those kinds of things. And that's fair from a consumer perspective to demand, and especially as we move forward with all of these IoT devices. Everyone has Nests and Alexas and all of these internet connected devices. The consumer really needs to be able to have an understanding of what the risk basis is for that decision. It shouldn't be buried in a bunch of legalese somewhere. It should be upfront, clear, so people can make an informed decision to let it be collected or not. So that's my hope.
Yeah, well, mine too. These user agreements that you've mentioned a few times, you're right. I mean, I don't know of anybody who actually reads them, just because they are so difficult and complex to get through, and most people don't understand half of what it's actually saying. Do you think that we're going to have some sort of legislation that simplifies the user agreements, or has some mechanism to basically tell folks in plain English what they're subscribing to? It just seems like right now that, companies are kind of being let off the hook by the fact that, they are making things so difficult for folks to understand that we kind of don't have any choice, if you will.
I think legislation from a personal perspective would be one way to go. I would hope that companies are being more kind of proactive and recognizing that this is a significant consumer concern. So they're doing it in advance. I know some of the larger companies have started doing that more explicitly, and I just hope that trend catches on and that just becomes the norm, because it is a big change to the way that kind of business typically has been done. So it's not something that would happen overnight, but I think with more awareness of the problem or of this issue and that people find it concerning, it's really in everyone's best interest, especially companies, if they want, consumer loyalty and confidence, to make that more explicit, to be a little more transparent about, what they're collecting and how it's used.
So going back to the technology and these applications and the question of privacy, are you guys seeing more applications that are doing this kind of call it covert tracking, if you will, even though it's perfectly legal because of the user agreement? Do you see more organizations or more applications that are using this type of technology to track individuals and use it for ostensibly for marketing purposes or whatever? And then is that something that we're going to just kind of have to get used to, if you will?
We haven't done enough comprehensive research to say if we're seeing it commonly across a number of apps being collected without people's knowledge. So I can't really comment one way or the other if there's an uptick or not, unfortunately. It would just be a guess.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, recognizing then that consumers, for the most part, are either oblivious to the fact that this is happening and the security implications thereof, or they just don't care. Do you think that the developer community kind of has a mission, if you will? Do you think that they really need to be more aware of how consumers might react to this invasion of privacy, if you will? I mean, I kind of feel like it's their onus. The onus is on them to kind of protect consumers' information and kind of keep their data more private, if you will. But I'm not sure that a lot of organizations are really kind of keeping that in mind as they develop their applications. And so I'm wondering if there's, maybe there needs to be kind of a collective, turnaround in the way organizations approach data privacy for their users.
I agree. I think that's something that we're going to see. And I think we're starting to see it more and more with a lot of the bigger social media companies where they're having to kind of make some changes or be more transparent. I think we're going to start seeing that cascade. And I would expect other organizations and companies operating in a similar-ish kind of space to be paying attention to that as well. Because once, if the big tech giants are moving in that direction, that kind of shows that there's definitely a sea change going on, and that's going to affect the smaller businesses as well. Because if the large ones are telling me and this little one isn't, I'm already predisposed usually just for market share. I'm more familiar with the other one. So to be competitive, it's really going to be required. And some of these apps are built where the developers don't necessarily know that the app they're developing is going to be collecting this data. One of the pros and cons of developing apps is that you can plug and play a lot of different code modules, essentially. So it's really common for developers to reuse or share or pick ones that they find online that fulfill a functionality that they need in their app. The problem is if they aren't also going through and validating all of the code separately, they don't even know that this one that they're incorporating is doing this, collecting this data on the back end. One of the examples we had in our research was a package just like that, where it was reused a lot and it was very popular. But, if the developer isn't explicitly going through, they don't know that it's doing that in the back end because they didn't kind of validate the code themselves.
That's interesting. So, so it wasn't an overt action then. It was more of a, kind of a side, an issue that kind of cropped up in the development, and that actually kind of brings up the idea of, DevSecOps or incorporating security farther left in the DevOps tool chain and understanding, the importance of security, application security, and the very real threat of reusing code from code bases and not understanding what that code actually includes. So do you think that there's going to be more of a push on maybe the developer community to understand exactly what codes they are including in their development, their coding for their applications? Because it seems to me that, between the security risks of inadvertently including code such as what we're discussing today, and just having problems with the code and vulnerabilities, that we're going to see a lot more of these issues crop up with new code as it's released, if it hasn't been tested and vetted and tested properly. Do you think that that's going to be kind of maybe another area where folks will be focusing their efforts, and maybe in the coming year on making that code more secure and making sure that the code they are using is more secure?
I think we're seeing that happen. One thing I want to highlight is the reuse and the sharing of things like this. This isn't new or something that hadn't happened before there were applications. Right. This has happened as long as there's been computers. Like, as someone who's written and coded some things, like I absolutely copy and paste from things I've done before that worked, or from things I can source elsewhere. So I think this is, if anything, it's just kind of a continuation of something that has been a problem. And I think there's definitely been more focus on it in recent years, and there's a lot more progress being made to people paying attention to this. And part of it is also that the security component is just a totally different mindset. There's a reason it's a totally different field from traditional developers and people that are building things. So a lot of times it's just not in the mindset of the person that's building it that some of these things could be used badly, because their intentions are pure, and it's legal, and they can use this data to try to improve their product. The problem is they don't, that's not their job. They don't think about it that way. So I think injecting that, as you were saying earlier, into the cycle, we're having, more kind of cross specialty and cross team looks at things more holistically, that will drive a lot of this, because it ensures that those things are caught earlier, because you'll have people that think about all of the bad ways I could use this data,
right?
Talking to people that are just thinking about how are all of the good ways that I can use this data, and then they can come to a compromise where they're acknowledging what they're collecting and why, and they're doing it consciously with a knowledge of the risk and the gain.
Yeah. Okay. So it seems to me that we are using a lot more open source code in our application development efforts, and between the as I said before, the issues such as what we're discussing, a lot of open source code actually isn't updated on a regular basis. And I know that also introduces a level of vulnerability that maybe developers just aren't aware of. So, I wonder if, we are going to see kind of a concerted effort among the developer community to ensure that open source code is updated regularly, and, and vetted to be sure that the code that they're using is actually the code they want and the version they want. So I think we're going to see some interesting times ahead in the next year or so, especially as it relates to DevSecOps and application development and security in general. But Jen, thank you very much for kind of walking me through kind of where we are today, and telling us about the Baidu applications and really the state of security and privacy in today's application development. So thanks again. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good day.
Thanks. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Everybody, happy Monday. Welcome again to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with the Monday edition of the webinars preview. As always, we have so many great webinars coming up on Devops.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard, as well as a ton of webinars that we have done that are on demand on the sites. But I thought I'd let you know about 3 that are coming up immediately so that you can mark your calendar and hopefully join us for them. The first one is called XDR, Extended Detection and Response, the next generation of protection. This is happening Tuesday, December 8th at 11 a.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard, and it's sponsored by Cynet. This webinar focuses on XDR technology and the capabilities and benefits provided by emerging XDR solutions. We'll take a look at the business and technology value drivers for XDR solutions, what capabilities security practitioners should look for in an emerging XDR offering, and how XDR can not only extend detection, but also offer extended response capabilities. We'll also have a live demo, yay, of a fully automated XDR incident response workflow, including investigation, root cause analysis, impact analysis, and automated remediation actions. Good stuff there. I'm looking forward to that one. The next webinar is called Proactive Amazon RDS Performance Monitoring with Datadog. That one is also happening Tuesday, December 8th. This one is at 1 p.m. Eastern on Devops.com, and it is sponsored by Datadog. This webinar is all about monitoring Amazon Relational Database Service and how to get the most out of Datadog's platform and RDS capabilities, as well as key metrics when monitoring Aurora, MySQL, PostSQL, easy for me to say, MariaDB, SQL, and Oracle engines, standard, enhanced, and native monitoring options, logging, events, and tracing for databases, and custom metrics derived from deep database queries. Lots of stuff in this webinar, so definitely if you are working with Amazon Web Services and you're looking for performance monitoring, this one is definitely one to check out. All right, the third webinar today is happening also Tuesday, December 8th. This one is at 3 p.m. Eastern on Devops.com. It is called Validate Your Disaster Recovery Strategy, Ensuring Your Plan Works, sponsored by Gremlin. This webinar is all about disaster recovery, and it will go over some things such as best practices for creating a disaster recovery plan framework and frameworks for assessing risks, as well as how to test your disaster recovery planning by using chaos engineering to simulate black swan events, and how to measure the success of your disaster recovery plan, including a post-mortem guide and key metrics to track, I should say. All right, that's all I have for today's edition of the webinars across Devops.com, Security Boulevard, and Container Journal. Please check back tomorrow when I'll have a fresh batch for you. But until then, stay safe.
All right, great stuff, Charlene. Now let's go over to the Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley, where Mitch has Garrett Smith, CTO with Eggplant Software. And I believe he also has a second one with Ron, I covered it up there. Ron Benetton, GM of Imperva on App Security. So 2 good interviews and analysis today in our Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, the pleasure of being joined by Gareth Smith, who's CTO with Eggplant Software. Gareth, great to be talking with you today.
Hi, Mitch. Thank you. Nice to be here.
Great to have you. So tell us a little bit about yourself as CTO with Eggplant Software, and tell us about Eggplant Software too.
Sure. Yes, CTO of Eggplant Software. I have been in both public and private software companies, both US and European-owned companies. I worked in areas across technical services, R&D, product management, but always had a background in usability, user experience, and I've always liked that user-focused part of the world, and that's really what led me into the interest around Eggplant. And Eggplant itself, not too far from you, is founded originally in Boulder a little over 10 years ago. And the team there really were distraught about their testing area, and they saw an opportunity about testing things as a human would, and then looking at the actual user experience and how can we test the user experience. And I thought there was something in there that we can expand on and then go from there. So Eggplant itself, we're the recognized leader in intelligent test automation by folks like Gartner and Forrester. And we are really looking at turning QA from a rubber stamping exercise in that 600 of my 700 tests have passed. And what does that mean? But turning that into something useful and turning that into does that make our customers happy? Are we going to increase revenue from that? And then looking at how do you regenerate and rejuvenate the world of QA into something that is more of a profit center, in that we can have a greater say for that team and supercharge those teams, because we know that bad software is a direct correlation to poor revenue, high customer churn, and so on. And then more latterly, earlier this year, we were acquired by Keysight Technologies. They focused more on hardware test and automation. And then combined with Keysight, we really are then the whole one-stop shop for true test automation, because we can test both the hardware as well as the software. Increasingly, things are then a combined set. If you think about a phone, a car, even a fridge freezer, right? They are a combined set of software and hardware, and they just have to work. And the scope of testing we need to make sure those things work is increasingly large. So the things we need to test are more and more. The quality needs to be higher, and people have less and less patience with things that don't work. So that's the problems we're looking to address.
A great combination. Virtually no hardware is being shipped without software in some form, whether it's on board or in the cloud or both, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great things, and we both share sort of a high interest in customer experience as well. So, testing gets a lot of focus right now, and some of it's because we can do software faster, we can do automation. There's a lot of emphasis around speed with DevOps and things like that. But as you were mentioning, sort of getting out the right software with the right quality is, of course, in a good time frame, acceptable time frame is really what you're after. What do you see as sort of the challenges today that you particularly are going after that folks are having on testing?
But we see most folks using and relying on manual testing to do that. Increasingly, the importance is on end-to-end testing, because that's the actual customer experience. That's what you're testing. And the folks today address that with manual testers. And the reason for that is manual testing is intelligent, because very often these systems are across different types of technologies. And it's much easier for a human to do that than to use a traditional approach of a traditional automated regression pack. So the manual testers are intelligent, and they can automate any system and so on. But obviously that's much slower. There's a barrier to things like DevOps, rapid delivery and so on. So we'll bring in things like automated regression packs. That is not as intelligent. It is much more complex in the way that you deploy those systems out. It doesn't test things like the user experience and so on. But those are the two main approaches that folks use right now. And an intelligent set of humans and a non-intelligent set of really regression packs, which really just test the things we know about, rather than looking at the things that we don't know. What are the future? What are the other combinations? And the other problem we see is that DevOps is encapsulating both the dev and the ops world. And there's a lovely figure of 8 infinity loop of, we're bringing all the data back from the ops and we're reusing our stuff in development. But what we find is there's a couple of gaps with that cycle. One is that it's not really continuous delivery to operations and bring it back. It tends to be a continuous delivery to a deployment, then a 2-3 week QA cycle where we make sure the thing's going to be okay. So there's a gap in there, and then we deploy that out. And then also very few feedback data points from operations back into development. So it's very little in the form of getting those insights back. How are people using, how are our customers using the system? Which parts go down most often in operations and so on? So there are chunks of that DevOps cycle that have holes in it, and that's what we look to address with Eggplant.
I can't think of the number of times I've heard someone on the software team say, well, we never intended people to use it like that, use it that way. Customers, users will do some interesting things, actually, a lot of great things to learn from that. We've talked about a couple of really interesting aspects of this. One of them is user experience, right? What's that end to end? I do this, I get the result. And, overall it's a pleasant or productive or confusing, frustrating. Those are sort of soft kinds of measures. How do you put something like that into test suites and unit tests and things like that? Can they be represented well that way, or does that take AI and other technologies to start to do that?
Well, there's a set of technology you can do to provide that level of capabilities, but really the approach that we take is to look at it from the user's perspective. And it's quite a nice isolating approach that we've got, in that we look at it as the user would. And so if I'm using an iPhone, let's say, to do some testing on, then I'm testing my application. But in many cases, I may have things like two-factor authentication. So I get a text message that appears with a number. From our perspective, it's all the same system. It is the same mechanism we're using in order to do that. Whereas I'm using a separate dedicated framework to test that, maybe I'm using an Appium framework to test my mobile device, then that's really out of scope, right? I can't really get access to that text message content, so I have to have a workaround in order to do that. So those frameworks tend to focus on testing pieces of the overall experience rather than the end-to-end experience. And that's where the first factor of testing the user experience comes from, is that you're testing the actual user experience rather than a perception, like an indirect view of it. Another example of that is with frameworks like Appium, is that they were, and Selenium being the most popular one, I think, is that they test the user interface, but actually it's testing the UI, the API to the UI. So it's not actually testing the user interface itself. It's giving you a good representation of what the objects say underneath that. And so that's really powerful. That's really useful. We include those APIs within Eggplant as well, because there's a lot of benefit to object-based testing. But you can't rely on it to decide what the user experience is. And we just, over the years, collected lots of examples where the Selenium test would pass, but we would fail that test, and we look at the difference and we go, oh, that's white font when rendered on a white background. So it's unreadable. Or the OCR, the font is too small, and our OCR technology would pick that up. Other areas, the great examples we got is that the content is correct, the color is correct, but actually being rendered on screen in a dingbats font. And so it's not really readable by that human. And so those are the areas that really focus on the difference to what is the user experience compared to what do we think we're presenting to those users. And the separate element we'll have is something we call reusability mode. And that's looking at individual setups and individual screens and giving it as an assessment. And so when we think about the user experience, we've talked so far about functional testing. And that's easy to understand. Is it broken? Does the image of the shoes I want to buy appear on the screen? Does the checkout button appear, and so on? I can get that. It gets more difficult when I talk about performance testing, because then I have to comprehend what performance means. It doesn't work or not work. I have to put some parameters around what I want to get to and what the results are. And the same with usability testing. If we have somebody who tried to describe what good usability was, that's a difficult aspect. Now, because we're able to intelligently understand the system under test, the application, the app, whatever we're looking at, we can make a whole bunch of assessments on there and identify factors that would lead to poor usability. Things like, here's an icon or an image or a button I'm going to click, but as my app loads, the thing I was going to click just shifts position just on the last minute, and you click on the wrong thing. Now, there are some organizations where you actually want that, because I actually want you to click on that advert, right? But largely, you don't want that to happen. You want to click on the thing you intended to. We look at color contrast and color patterns. And so having red font on a blue background would yield higher eye strain over time. And so those different patterns we'll look at in your technology and give you a usability score of that to say that here are the challenges you've got. This will lead to poorer overall customer experience and user experience, and therefore, directly impact what you want to do with that application and the business behind it.
Very interesting. It's some of us are really good at developing software. Not all of us are really good at designing really good interactions with software. It's a unique skill and an important one. We just had a roundtable we did on usability and accessibility and some of the kind of state of the art of that. It's a fascinating topic. Well, I'm also curious your thoughts on the whole DevOps, automation, acceleration. We've chatted before about getting the wrong software or bad software out faster isn't really a helpful thing. So there's a big emphasis on automating testing, and I'm a believer that not even you don't need to automate testing of everything. Not everything needs to be tested, right? Because you just expand your cycle time and make more maintenance of tests in many cases. What are your thoughts on what we're doing in DevOps today with automated testing, and maybe what we should be doing?
Yeah, that's a great, super wide topic, and lots to cover in there. The first aspect that I'd say is that I think we've definitely gone beyond the world where we will define a fixed number of tests and an increasing number of fixed tests that test historic elements. because that does two things for us. One is it tests stuff that we don't know is important anymore. It hasn't changed for some time. We're sort of burning our CPU cycles, if you like, testing stuff that doesn't matter. And the other part of it is that huge library, it needs maintaining. Even if this test delivers no value, I still have to make sure I maintain that. And that's a huge cost for folks, certainly our customers who look to us to address that challenge. So the approach that we take is a very unique model-based approach to testing. It gives you a methodology to define, here's the system or systems under test I want to define. And it's very simple. And what that does is give us all the different possible test combinations that are important in that world. Now, that yields another problem, because a simple representation of a model in our world can generate billions of test combinations. So the second problem is, yeah, but I can't run billions. So where do you want me to start? And that's where we leverage a whole set of AI technology to make that decision for us. But what the model representation gives for us is all the different types of flows. And this is where we find a lot of the defects that come out of the software that our customers use. So very simple example. Let's say you and I are now head of QA for a financial institution, and we just released a new application for our new banking app, right? So people understand that they can make transfers, payments, that sort of stuff. So what we would do is simply model that login screen. Three very simple concepts we'd have in the user name field, the password field, and the OK button. That's all you have to model. And in that, when we generate the tests automatically, we are able to easily generate the flow of username, password, and then OK. But what about the flow of password first, then the username, and then press the OK button? Now, that's the next test before we get to do something interesting with the rest of our application. But that flow is not something you or I would think of, but that's a flow that really happens. And so in our next time, let's try a different variant and really expend our test coverage into much wider areas. And so not just the data of things like your correct username and password and so on, but what are the different types of flows? And you expand that out even further for my environment. If it's running on a mobile device of some form, I may rotate the device. I might have it in landscape and then have it in portrait. But what about the username in landscape? And then I rotate it to portrait, then I put the password in. You know, all of a sudden, all the different real world testing combinations on something as mundane as a login screen are bewildering. And so then I go into my real application. Now I've got transfers and payments. And what happens if I drop network connection while I'm making a transfer? Will it come back correct? And all those different real world problems, they don't tend to be covered by traditional test cases. You just think about I've got so much to do. I've got to write 1,000 of these things. What are the best approaches I've got to working out what those flows are? I haven't got time to think about the real customer and real world user experience impact of some of those. So the approach that we've got is very simple. Define it in a model. The model encodes all those different areas. But as I said, the billion of different test combinations that the model can encode, that then is unfeasible for a human to work out, okay, but which ones, if I can only run 500 tonight, which 500 should I run? That's where we have internally an ensemble of different algorithms who look for different types of activity within the product. So things like make sure I've got some good coverage. It actively looks for bugs and looks for patterns it's seen previously, and then try and identify similar patterns elsewhere and so on. So those combined give us a way of focusing the testing on things that matters. The last thing I'll say on here that I'd also comes back to something we said earlier about DevOps is that the broken part of most DevOps loops of bringing information back in is we often find that there's a development team and the ops team, and they rarely speak to each other let alone electronically pass the information across. Usually the odd defect, and it's usually the other team's fault. But we can automatically bring back customer insights from the use of that application or systems in the real world. And then that gives here are the most common user journeys through your application. Most customers, most users use your application or flow in this way. Here's where the errors are. You can link that to business outcomes. So you can say, here's the areas that are most valuable to our business. So focus on those things. And when you're used to deployments like that, then you come back to organizations who don't have that level of visibility. you're really looking at a blank piece of paper and going, well, I think we should do this sort of stuff. So getting the real customer insights in really is a really enlightening experience.
I'm really interested in that too. Is it because you're doing things like looking at logs and doing machine learning and saying, okay, here are usage patterns that maybe we didn't recommend up front, but we're seeing actual end users doing so, and this tends to be more problematic, right? Browsers get refreshed in the middle of some transaction, or something happens that we're not going to think of testing as necessarily a software QA engineer. Is that the kind of approach you're talking about?
It is. It's similar to that. Yes, we take the information from the real users who are using that system. We take it back from any technology, and then we put that through our analytics layers to come out with the insights that we take from that. The first set of insights, as I mentioned, is things like the flows and the user path through it. That's really important. But there's also a bunch of other demographics, in that we're rolling out an application. To go back to our example of our banking application. Okay, we should test it on mobile devices. Okay, what platform should we test it on? And we may go, let's pick the latest iPhone. Let's go for the latest Android. But wouldn't it be nice to know what exactly the platforms our customers are, and realize actually they're on a 4-year-old version of Android? That's where most of our valuable customers are. And we've got it running on an iPhone 11 beautifully. Doesn't really work on that older Android. Okay, we should have fixed that before we rolled it out. You get all those sort of insights from bringing back in. And then, having those displayed to you immediately in the right place in the development team and the QA team, is where that information should be, and not squirreled away with in the ops team.
Tell us a little bit more then about Eggplant and kind of how you use AI. Is it part of just in portions of that end-to-end testing and the strategy that you use? Is it the model and how the data is collected and analyzed, and then recommendations, kind of everything from an expert engine approach to a machine learning sort of either on the fly or after the fact? How do you incorporate AI? Because we've joked before about, is this a case statement or is this really AI, right? So a lot of hype around AI. Some of it's real, some of it's not. I'm really curious about, and I'm sure yours is. I'm really curious about how you bring it into the problem space of testing.
Yeah, that's a great comment, and that is often one of the first areas I talk to when we speak to customers, and they say we're using AI. What does it really mean? And I tried not to go in too much about yes, AI can be a marketing term, and you're exactly right in that you look very carefully about, we're using AI for this. Some organization, you look under the covers a little bit more, and you think that that's a lookup table of some form, and you think that's not really learning. So there are a number of different, well-known classifications and types of AI technology. And I think within Eggplant specifically, we use a wide range of different types of AI machine learning algorithms in lots of different areas. And it's very much a utility and use case focused piece of technology. So for example, within the auto generation of test cases that we have within our product, one of the algorithms we use there is an unsupervised learning algorithm for identifying the defects. Now, unsupervised learning is not often used in production systems because it's very difficult generally to work out what the outcome is, because it can, it's unsupervised, it can learn all sorts of stuff. And so you have to be very careful about making sure that technology does what you expect it to do, and then you're able to guard and gauge the results of that and use the results appropriately. Different areas we use, for example, in our computer vision service within Eggplant, that's the mechanism that's able to visually, intelligently understand what's being shown to our system. We use a range of deep learning techniques, and that's a way of classifying what we're seeing. So rather than seeing a bag of pixels, we can say that's a text field, or that's a push button. And then we can infer more from that. And those nuggets of insights we get then lead further automation. So we're all about automating the end-to-end piece and looking at where we can fit different areas of technology across the whole platform to feed back in itself. And where we got to with our auto generation of test cases with our DAI product is the ensemble approach to look at tackling specific problems of where do I go next in my testing, and then bringing that together with a clever classifier of then working out what the next best action could be. And that's what the whole system has rolled up to be, number of individual algorithms. But as I said, we use it across the breadth of the whole different platform in different areas as it's needed. You're muted, Midge.
So it's probably a challenge sometimes not avoiding falling into the rabbit hole of AI and all the specifics of it. But I mean, I'm glad you brought up unsupervised as well as supervised machine learning. I think that's an important, helpful distinction for people to understand. Here's where we're doing, analysis, model analysis, vector analysis, things like that you can do in an unsupervised that will find patterns and say, this looks like something we can pull from this data from large data sets versus supervised, which is, that's a bug when that happens. That's a bug when, okay, now we know, and it's more directed towards it to help people understand how you're really implementing machine learning. Is that a concept that people are interested in you exploring with them to understand how you're using AI?
Absolutely, yeah. As you said, it's a buzzword, and there's a lot of skepticism around it because it is, overused. We're using AI for this, and then, as I said, you realize it's a case statement or a lookup table for it. So there is a keen to, show me how it works. Give me the X-ray, if you like, into the neural engine underneath, which is generally a very difficult thing to do because you can only really test it by giving it, well, here's a test set, I'd expect this out. And so what comes to that is then we're using AI to test AI because we're making sure the system, that is an AI system, that doesn't give us, in the same way, discrete deterministic results, but that is within our operating parameters. So our customers absolutely are keen to know how we work and see how it works under the hood. We are, though, working, and we make sure that the technology that we provide, you don't need to understand machine learning or AI to use it. We definitely have no-coder developers, no-coders as well as low-coders using the technology. And so we explain to folks who are interested how it works, but you don't need a PhD in data science to get going with it. And that would be a failure on our side if that was, if folks needed to do that. And the reason that we moved to unsupervised is that you said for supervised machine learning, here's a known data set, here's a known result. I can use that known data set to build my model, and we definitely do use that technology. The deep learning mechanism to classify UI elements, for example, is one of those. But for something that's dynamic, and our technology is used from companies from NASA to Walmart. And so we have to make sure that it works in all those different industries and domains. And we can't build a NASA-specific machine learning algorithm in there. We can't build a Walmart-specific one that may work in different retailers and so on. And so we have to make sure that it works in and of its own sense of what it can understand and what it can interpret. And that's where we needed to go down the unsupervised learning approach, and the sophistication of algorithms around that for both development as well as the production mechanism that we needed to make sure it did give us the right results. So as you can imagine, quite a lot of work gone into that particular mechanism to make sure it works across all those different industries and gives us the insights that we need.
Very good. I think it's a great explanation of why unsupervised makes sense. I'm curious, just a few minutes we have kind of left time together, just your thoughts on the trust level people have in AI, I'm talking about robots taking over the earth, right? Not that kind of AI. But is there a higher level of trust, kind of the same? Are people wanting to know a little bit more? Are they curious about it? What's the sense from the market as you implement AI in your testing strategies?
That's a great comment. There is initial skepticism around it, but I think it's combined. I think just if we said it was AI and then you could pick up a microphone and speak to it and say, can you test my system? Then I think people would need a little bit more handholding to work out what's going under the hood. But really the proof is in the pudding, in that our customers who use our technology would deploy it out, build out the model, It can be auto-generated. There's a whole bunch of other areas about all complete end-to-end intelligent automation that we haven't really spoke about in automating the whole end-to-end part of the testing lifecycle. But once we have the model, we auto-generate all the test cases around that automatically, then start running it on testing their system. And because we're moving from a world of I'm too busy to do something other than the username password okay for my login screen because I've got to test the thing, as soon as we start, we're just finding all sorts of defects because no one's tested those real user paths. We're still getting and testing the application in the way we need to, but we're trying different variants. And so you just get it and then you run it and then bang, failures and failures and failures and failures. We find all these failures really quickly. And so that's the best way of, I can talk as much as you like about very clever vectoring and so on, but really that's just talk, right? So getting it up and running and seeing your application that you thought was fine suddenly list all these defects. And the best part of those are on, live demonstrations we have. And it's just picking out those things on production applications and all sorts of areas pop up. So that's the proof of the pudding is very quickly just seeing it in action and then realizing that, oh, okay, it works. That's much more credible than 20 minutes of me talking to you.
No, as you say, that the real results that you can look at and say, okay, we're not testing that clearly. That's interesting, right? Yeah. Well, where can folks find out about Eggplant and check out your products and what you all do?
Well, we are all on eggplantsoftware.com. You can see on there all different types of, what we do, how it works, customer use cases, and all the usual stuff that you would expect as well.
Well, great. Gareth, it's been great talking with you. Fascinating subject. It's always fun when I get to delve back into AI and reach back into some experiences from my past too, and talk to an expert like yourself and what's happening in the market. So Gareth Smith, CTO with Eggplant Software. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Devops.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. Devops.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. Devops.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. Devops.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, the pleasure of being joined today by Ron Benetton, who is GM of Imperva Data Security. Welcome, Ron.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Good to be talking with you. I'm excited to chat a little bit about data security. Let's start out with just to introduce yourself, a little bit of your background. I know you had a recent event with your company in Imperva, and then tell us a little bit about what Imperva does.
Okay. Yeah. Let me start with what Imperva does. So we're a cybersecurity leader. We have over 6,000 global customers, and we're just focused on helping them protect data and all paths to it. And kind of what that means is we have both application security products and data security products, both of them leading in those spaces. But kind of our view is that in order to do a good job around data security, you really have to look at this as a whole thing. Otherwise, it becomes like a blanket thing, right? You pull it to one direction, you expose yourself on the other side, because data is, it's very complex, and securing all data and all ways that people access data is a difficult thing. So, like, for example, I could be really good at securing access to data from privileged insiders, but then you also get access through the applications. And the way that the data tier looks at things, it doesn't see enough when it's accessed through the application. So that's a problem. And then if you do a good job on the application side, maybe you have bots and APIs, but maybe you also have insiders, and maybe insiders are different when they access it directly, or they're admins of the data tier, or they're admins of the application tier. So really our view is, in order to do a good job, you really need to look at the whole access and all the paths to it.
Excellent.
So how did I get here? So I'm a 30-year data / security guy. So I've been both kind of working on the data side, whether it's a DBA or application side, but also on the security side. So I started my career in the military. I then worked on Wall Street for a while, areas around Sybase and Sybase security, Oracle security. Then I was one of the founders of Guardium back in the early 2000s, built this database security business, got acquired by IBM, was a CTO of data security at IBM for a while, left, founded JSonar, also in the data security space, and then a month ago got acquired by Imperva, so I now lead the data security business at Imperva.
You just keep getting acquired. I need to hang out with you a little bit more. Going back to Sybase, wow, yeah, I was a Sybase customer.
It's still being used all over the place.
Isn't it amazing? Yeah, technology never goes away. Never goes away. We just don't talk about it as much as we used to. Well, data security is such a fascinating topic. And I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but it's a bit like whack-a-mole, right? It's everywhere, and as soon as you think you've kind of got control over it pops up over here. It's sort of like that balloon that squeezes between your fingers. You think you've got your hands around it, and plus it's not a static thing. It's growing, it's evolving, it's being used by different applications in different ways. It's a huge challenge. I mean, how do you even begin to tackle that from a data security company?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, you're absolutely right. And we're all security professionals, so to us it looks like a bad thing. But before we go down that route, it's actually a good thing, right? I mean, the fact that it is so complex, it is because it's just hyper efficient, right? The people who are building data architectures are amazing. They're doing an amazing job, because if you look at a data architectures 20 years ago or even 10 years ago compared to what they are today, it's just it's like an immature baby compared to what's happening now. Because and it's a good thing, because these are highly optimized systems, very diverse types of workloads, very diverse technologies, right? A database today is not even close to what it was 20 years ago. A data lake today is an amazing thing. Okay, it's hard to even put your finger on it exactly what it is, a data lake, when you look at, say, an AWS data lake or an Azure data lake or a GCP data lake. They're amazing. So these are good things, right? Our applications are getting better, they're getting faster. We could do like crazy things with machine learning algorithms, doing analysis, telling us how to improve our lives. Okay, now as security people, we're always playing catch up. Okay, we're always these people are creating these things. And security is never exactly baked into that stack, although it is getting a little better. We're trying to get it a little better. So we are playing catch up, and it does create a lot of challenges on what it means to secure it well. So the fundamentals have never really changed, right? There's authentication, there's authorization, there's audit, there's a notion of finding where the data is, classifying. That stuff doesn't change. What does change is the complexity of doing each one of those tasks. So if you look at, even the first thing you kind of need to start looking at is, find all your sensitive data and make a catalog of it and know the lineage. And 40 years we're doing the same thing, and it just gets harder and harder, because you look at one of these data lakes. I think 10 years ago when we were building a data lake or thinking of a data lake, we would think of, okay, we're probably doing some kind of a Hadoop project, okay, which in itself was complex enough as it is, because you've got like eight or nine different services running, each one doing something a little different.
It wasn't that long ago. I mean,
it wasn't that long ago, but it's dead, right? It's dead. That part's dead. Now we're building something which is infinitely more complicated because, like, I'll give you an example. A lot of my customers are building things on AWS. So you got it's not like the data lives in one place. Okay, you've got S3 buckets, and then you've got access sometimes from Athena, sometimes through Spectrum, sometimes from both, and then you have some DynamoDB or DocumentDB databases for doing transient things, and then you shove it into Redshift so your Tableau can access it, and then you have AWS Glue moving things around, and maybe you even have a Hadoop stack inside EMR for the landing area.
We have data and databases inside containerized.
Yeah, everywhere. And then you say, well, how do I secure one of these beasts? And so, yeah, it's complicated. It's risky. And we just need to keep up with these guys who are doing a good job with making very innovative architectures. And, it would be great, by the way, if we could have baked this into the stack before they even started. Okay, but like, I'm too old to believe in fairy tales.
Stop chasing that rainbow, right?
Yeah, and we just do need to keep up with them. We need to keep up with them. We need, because a lot of my customers are larger, and if they're larger, then sometimes they're regulated somehow, or they need to adhere to something. And certainly these days, they're all also troubled by all kinds of privacy compliance issues. So we need to give them controls that they're used to getting, on the stuff that they've been building for the last 30 years on-prem. And it gets to a point that the application team wants, they're ready. They finished everything. They're migrating it up. And even simple things, not even complex things like cloud. They have an application using SQL on-prem and they want to move it to SQL on Azure. Simple enough, right? Not really, because on-prem, they know what their tooling looks like. They know what their controls are. They know what they're doing with privileged access. They know how to scan. They know how to create the policy for defining access. They know how to manage. They know how to do change management around that policy. Now they all move it to the cloud. Sometimes those controls are there. More often they're not there. And so for example, one of the things that we view as being fundamentally important for us is to make that transition seamless. Okay, same controls, different methods, different tools, different policy orchestration. But to them, it should look the same. If it looks the same, then when the app team wants to move it over, security stops being this bad guy that says, nope, stop, okay, tell me what you did here. I mean, we can't be the bad guys, okay? We have to.
Can't be the cops, can't be the roadblock.
Yeah. We need to help. We can't keep stopping things. It's just a bad dynamic.
So let me ask you, there's so many dimensions to this and usages of data. So is that one, instead of like getting ahead of all of it and designing it up front, which we wish we always could, doesn't happen. Is that the right approach? Kind of thinking about how do we do security right? Is that creating whether it's the tooling or the framework or the structure of how we secure data, making that consistent. So no matter the environment, we now know how to do it, and we can do it in a reasonably consistent way and know that it's been done, as opposed to, N+1 for every environment that we're in. It's all different and it's all complex, and nobody can keep track of any of it, more or less secure it. Is that sort of getting our hands around this problem?
Yes, that is absolutely like the one sentence summary is exactly that. And
a long sentence, but
a long sentence. Yeah, because we need to abstract things out and hide the complexity, right? We need the fact that the data environment is so complex. It doesn't change that if you go high enough, the problem statement or the what you need to do statement is the same. Okay, the problem is that when you translate it to, okay, what actually happens, then it tends to be different here, different here, different here. But at a high enough level, it's exactly the same thing. So, you know, what if the environments are getting more sophisticated and the architectures are getting more complex in a good way, if securing them also gets more complex, then we've lost. So what we need to do is make it maintain a single abstraction layer, and then do the magic that translates it into the individual changes. So it's absolutely what we need to do. Now, some of this is a heterogeneous question. Okay? Some of it is a heterogeneous thing where, you know, you have different silos, and you know, historically, people have always looked at data as a bunch of silos.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's like the database silos, the big data silo, the file silo. That stuff gets blurred, because in the cloud, it's very blurry. Okay, like you can definitely say that S3 is a file system. Okay, it's an object store. It's kind of like a file system, but then you slap Athena on top of it, and that gives you SQL queries on top of that file store. So is it now a file system, or is it a SQL database? What is that thing? It's
DynamoDB, and now you've got a whole bunch of different ways of accessing and using that data.
So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it, which is almost the same sentence that you said, but semantically it has a different meaning. Okay, if you look at kind of the concept of data governance, okay, from in the last 20 years, it's always been like at the top, there's things like policy and things like, you know, what are the business requirements, and at the bottom there's the tooling. And always, whenever you talk to anybody in this space, they always say, don't start here, don't start at the bottom by just implementing tooling, start here and then do this. Well, I've yet to meet a single company that has started here. You always start here. So
when do you get the luxury, right?
Yeah, look, part of it is just us people, okay? Where us people are problematic, okay? People can understand very concrete things very well, and therefore we can go do a project that does this, and we can do a project that, and the vendor landscape has never helped because products are like this and like this. So, and you go to the analysts, and the analysts say, oh, you need to pick one of these and one of these and one of these. So, you know, for many years, it's been one of these, okay, nobody started here, everybody started here, and then projects have operationalization problems. It's not that you know, tools have problems. It's the fact that even if a tool does everything it was supposed to be doing, it gets hard to operationalize things. And then you start looking at it and you say, okay, within these silos, there's actually no difference to operationalize things. It's the same thing, okay? You need the same processes, you need the same decisions, you need the same policy push down. So why are we doing it 6 times? Why are we not doing it one time? Well, we're not doing it one time because we didn't start here. And so over time, you know, I kind of gave up on people starting here and assumed people will always start here. The question is that abstraction, can you now take work that you've done within any one of those silos and leverage that in order to create that kind of in the middle, like a single control layer. Okay, I mean, a single control layer that then uses those tools, but create something that is, you know, consistent. And if you start creating something that is consistent, then you're not, you know, you're not balled into these silos. And then when you get some of these more kind of advanced architectures, you know, you're not screwed because you didn't create something just for this silo and this silo and this silo.
And then you know that all the bases are covered too. You're not having to, you know, do a unique process or solution for all the check marks you've got to put in place. And who knows if those work reliably in every environment, whatever way you figure it out to secure the data or do access control or manage data integrity, whatever that is. Yeah. Well, let me ask you, I think Maybe other than the you getting acquired by Aperva, most of us want to put a checkbox on 2020, kind of wrap it up in in cellophane, put it into a bucket of cement and drop it in the river. Let's get past this year and move on to 2020. So as you think forward. And getting security right. We're in this COVID era, right? And that light switch isn't going to turn off any day soon. We're going to be some evolution of this for whether there's vaccines or not, right? But that is rapidly, seriously accelerated digital transformation projects and changed some things fundamentally about assumptions we make. We can shed some of that evolution, and we're there in many cases. How has that affected your thinking around data security in this era? Because we're in it. We're not heading towards being transformed. We're living it right now.
Yeah, I think this is actually one of the few positive side effects of COVID. I can't tell you how sick I am of being here. I need to go somewhere. I really need to go somewhere. I'm like sick, but
what day is it anyway? I can't figure it out.
Yeah, I just can't even tell you. but the acceleration that this has given to cloud projects is one of the side effects that I think is very positive, because for years, I'm a technology guy, and if it were up to me, everything would be on cloud, bar none, nothing. There would be scorched earth, everything else. And, I keep hearing people saying, but it's more expensive. It's more expensive only if you look at it at the actual numbers of the cost you pay the cloud providers. But if you look at how much more effective it is and how much easier, it's like buying super duper IT. Okay, that's really what it's about. It's not about anything else. It's about buying people who know exactly what they're doing, and that you never get to a point that you always have when you build your own stuff where you got people finger pointing, no, it's a storage problem. No, it's a host problem. It just works. Okay, so I think it's great. I think it does create a lot of challenges for security just because it's very new. Okay, it's very new and it's very, very fast. And new doesn't mean it's like 6 months old, but even if it's 6 years old, it's all new. It's like somebody built everything that anybody built around data centers from scratch, really. Okay, or it looks different, or it's called different. And then the problem, again, going back to people, the problem is always people. So a lot of companies, what they've done in order to accelerate this very, very quickly is they've built a separate security architecture for the cloud group to parallel the cloud architecture group, which is different from the old guys. Okay, so now you get people who understand data security pretty well because they've done it for many, many years. You have people who understand data very well, and then you have people who understand cloud very well, but they're not the same people. Okay, so now you get a skills issue, and almost like a language issue. Okay, it's like it's like a Babel again in some respects. It's like, how do you call this? What is this? Is it the same? What's a VPC? How many different ways do you have to connect things into a VPC? What does that impact? My data architecture, and what are the flows? And so I do look at 2021 as a great year, because if people have been going at a certain pace into the cloud, it's all accelerated.
I think that is a really important point, because when you've been disrupted, and we've all been disrupted in personal lives, but when you accelerate something that fast, the saying, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, necessity with urgency is like the mother of invention right now. And it's almost like you can't do things the way you've been doing. You can't go along in parallel paths, because suddenly we're all now here. We're all in the cloud together, or in a place that's much different than we were. Do you think that is enough of an accelerant to get sort of those silos of people across cloud security and on-prem security, and those start to work together of thinking how we manage, because so much more of it now is moved to the cloud? Or is that a good assumption? I mean, tell me what your thoughts are.
You know, it's because it's people. I don't know how to answer that. You know, we're getting into the realms of psychology more than anything. But I can tell you that, you know, it's good. It's got to happen, and we're going to make mistakes, right? As an industry, we're going to do this. It's good that we're doing it. And we're going to make more mistakes because it's less known, because we don't always have the right skills. Mm-hmm. And I think it's our job, you know, our job in the industry is to try to reduce those mistakes, because mistakes lead to things that we don't want to happen. And we do have the ability to avoid mistakes. Okay, we just need to be very clear. We can't be like super techies about it. Okay, we have to do things that are practical, because what you asked is about human behavior. So really, it's not enough we create technology. We need to create technology that is accessible to people and that people can consume very easily. It's one of the things that kind of in security, I think we're doing a much better job now. And my entire focus is really on this, on making things practical and usable, very often more important than a certain feature function. Okay, it's
I totally agree with that. Yeah. Well, you know, what I was thinking about is that when you have that disruption, think about choosing productivity tools. How many organizations were debating, we're going to go to Teams, we're going to go to Slack, let's study it for a year. It turns into 2 years, and you finally make a decision. All of a sudden, that decision gets made in 2 weeks or a week or a day, a couple of days. Like, how could you just have to? You're forced to make some decisions and make some changes. What I'm wondering is, if you accelerate to the cloud and you have, you know, a framework, an architecture, something like an Imperva, that okay, we've solved some of those issues. Let's just solve them for other folks and help each other save some time, right? You don't have to, sure, check me out, validate it. You think this is all the right thing to do, but if you've got to do something quick, we've got a good bit of that problem solved. Seems like you're in a good position from that standpoint.
Yeah, and I do believe so. I think that we started very early with the cloud, and how do you do this well? And so we are in a good position. I also really, you know, you said something about this productivity tools making the decision in 2 weeks, and it's one of my, you know, one of my pet peeves for my entire life has been something. I don't see it changing, by the way, yet, but I really wish it would change. Okay, is this concept of a POC? Okay. Mm-hmm. Where you need something, like go back to your 2 years versus 2 weeks. What does that mean? It means somebody picked without doing a POC, right? Okay, great.
Make a bet, and if it's wrong,
okay, make a bet, and make a bet based on what? You made a bet based on either something that's more usable or very usable, or something that everybody else is using.
To the result, I think that's what it comes down to, right? What is going to get there? That's the quick understanding. Nothing's going to be perfect. We're going to have issues with whatever we choose.
Yeah,
right. Of course.
Yeah, and this entire industry forever has been, okay, I can't pick anything until I do a POC. But when I do a POC, I'm actually not even checking what's important, because I can't reproduce my production environment. I can't produce the load. So I'm just going to test something. Okay, I'll test like really simple things. Can you do this? Can you do that? Which has absolutely no bearing on whether you'll succeed or not. And what I'm starting to see, especially on the cloud, because it's much easier to just look at things, much easier to talk to people, much easier to see what your colleagues are doing, what your peers are doing, is I'm hoping that accelerates things, because if we need to do something tomorrow, we're just not going to wait. We're not going to wait 9 months.
So here's what might start to change that behavior. I'm not going to proclaim that it's changed that behavior, but through this COVID experience, using that productivity tool example, guess what? Executives, the non-techies of the company, look at us and say, how come we can make a decision in 2 days when we were going to take 2 years to do it? If we can make that decision in 2 days, I want us to make other decisions quickly. Maybe it's not always 2 days, but we've proven we can make some good decisions under some very difficult conditions and rapidly. Let's exercise and build up that muscle and do that more often than the thing that we debate about forever. So I think there may be some pressure from the business, who's also, by the way, very disruptive. They're having to adjust. They're having to go into defense or offensive mode in the business climate. And they want to be able to experiment very quickly. That's part of what digital transformation is about, right? Try some things, experiment in market, go after, learn quickly, much like we do in the kind of continuous improvement. So that might be the thing that nudges us off of the comfortable stool of let's take 9 months / 2 years to study it and make a decision or run it, do an RFP for everything. I hate RFPs, but just like POCs for you. But maybe that's the thing that tilts it a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to declare success yet, but
I agree. I agree. I think it's it's one. I've been in startups all my life. Okay, so one of the things that is really fundamental when you look at a VC that's investing in a company, they're investing in the people, not in the company.
Exactly.
And the technology, they don't know yet. Okay.
They know you don't have it figured out. Otherwise, somebody else would have done it, right? So your job is to figure it out, but get the right people that can do it.
But they invest a lot of money very quickly. Okay. They don't take 9 months, right? So I believe that, when people look at their partners, who they're going to partner with, they need to look at, what are the founding principles of the company? How much is the company going to care about me? What is it going to do for me? Are they going to be there when I need them? And I'm not saying technology is not important, because product is everything, but it's product and the people that stand behind it, and the decisions need to be made also from the business level.
So we're kind of running up against our time here. I'm going to point out this irony, and hopefully you'll come back and talk about it. So you were just talking about investing in people, which is what VCs do. I totally agree with that. And earlier we were talking about, the problem we're talking about is human behavior and people, right? So there are conditions of which will drive different behaviors. And hopefully that's something we can explore about data and data security some more. We have you back again soon.
Okay. I'd love that.
Good. Well, Ron, it's been a pleasure. I wish you all the best. Congratulations on the acquisition, and hopefully you'll be able to get out of your 4-brick wall cell there at some point and enjoy the world again. All of us will, but I wish you the best. It's been great talking with you. Great. Thanks for joining us today, folks. We'll talk to you soon.
Great stuff there today, Mitchell. Thanks so much. Many thanks to our sponsors. Many thanks to you out there. Guys, I said it at the top of the show. We're probably going to have a dark few months here with COVID, especially in the U.S., for a lot of reasons I don't want to get into. But wear a mask, wash your hands, keep socially distanced, don't contribute to the overall suffering that humanity's going through. You know, where the good news is we're starting to roll. In another week or two, hopefully, we'll start rolling out the first vaccines. Until then, stay vigilant, stay strong, TechStrong. This is Alan Schummel. We're out.